Chapter 1387. Boom. Everyone from the insane sect spat out blood and retreated. The snowboarder army at the back coughed out blood and almost fainted. However, the barrier did not break, but the arrow was still spinning crazily, trying to tear the barrier apart. Kill! The divine dragon army shot out 10 waves of arrows. After 10 waves, they threw their spears at the barrier. The barrier was on the verge of collapse, but it was still intact. Yi Qinghan swallowed a supreme divine pellet without hesitation. His divine power rushed to his limbs and bones, and the barrier condensed again. What? The barrier was filled with the laws and order of the world. A sound wave and energy rushed to the other side, blowing away the front row of the army. Boom, 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 boom. The firm steps of the army were accompanied by the sound of the drum. The passage was filled with cracks and momentum. Long Ziyue and Martial Emperor's expression changed. They did not expect Yi Qinghan to block the attack of the Sky Destroyer Bao. Set up the barrier, block them in the passage and wait for reinforcements. Martial Emperor's eyes flashed coldly. He did not want to fight to the death with Yi Qinghan. After all, the 5 pseudo-world weapons could blast the 600,000 army until they lost their bearings. What? The 2 Supremes took the lead to set up a barrier 30 meters away from the exit. Then, with the support of 600,000 soldiers, it formed an indestructible barrier. Divine light fluctuated like ripples on water. Under the illumination of the sun, it looked very beautiful. Boom! After 10 breaths, the 2 barriers collided. Qi rushed to the starry river and the cliff trembled, but it did not collapse. Kacha! Yi Qinghan retreated and crushed the mountain rocks. However, the 2 martial emperors were also shaken. The 600,000 army had the advantage. They could attack together, but the snowboarder army only had 100,000 to cooperate with the insane sect. The 100,000 snowboarder army suffered a heavy blow. Although most of the force was taken by the insane sect, it was not easy for them. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 armies continued to collide. Qi waves rushed to the sky and collided with each other. It was like a tug of war. The aftermath of the collision made the army bleed from their 7 orifices. Even Yi Qinghan's body was cracking and almost exploded. Yi Qinghan's boiling dragon blood rapidly healed his wounds. In addition, he still had more than half of the Supreme God Medicine's power left. Now, Yi Qinghan's body twisted as he forcefully pushed the energy barrier forward. Kakaka! The rocks beneath his feet kept crumbling, and the cliffs on both sides were shifting. It was as if the tectonic plates underground were being moved. Stop them! Let's go! Long Ziyue roared angrily. He didn't expect Yi Qinghan's body to be even stronger than his own. In the face of such a collision, Yi Qinghan was standing at the front and withstanding it, yet he was still able to erupt with such strength. What he didn't know was that 80% of the shockwaves from the collision with Yi Qinghan's body had been absorbed by the feather spirit robe. Otherwise, with his strength, his body would have collapsed long ago if he had withstood the majority of the impact. However, Yi Qinghan's body was indeed terrifying. The 5 elemental Dao body and dragon vein were like immortal. After being injured, they were able to quickly recover. It wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. To humans, he wasn't even considered a human. He was a saint whose body had reached the limit. Yi Qinghan's gaze was cold as he forcefully pushed forward with his army. He wanted to push them out of the Tong Tian Gorge. Seeing the Dragon Divine Army and Heaven Martial Army crazily expending their divine power, a sinister smile appeared on his face. If 100,000 soldiers were to exhaust the divine power of 600,000 soldiers, the remaining 200,000 Snow Kingdom army and 1,000,000 other soldiers would be able to shock these 600,000 people to death. Boom.ka. The cliffs on both sides were broken, and the rocks were crushed into fine powder by the 2 barriers, disappearing into nothingness. Yi Qinghan actually brought his army and pressed forward step by step. They were only 8 meters away from the exit. Boom! Pressing forward step by step, Supreme Sky Martial Army and Long Ziyue retreated step by step. 600,000 people couldn't withstand 100,000 people. All experts above the rank of Chiliarch stopped them at all costs. Wait until dawn, General Sun will come to their aid. At that time, we will squeeze them to death in this Tong Tian Gorge. This will be their final resting place. Long Ziyue roared. He didn't want to fight against Yi Qinghan because they didn't have a pseudo-world artifact. However, how could Yi Qinghan give them the chance to do so? His body erupted, and with a loud boom, they were pushed back another meter. Advancing another meter was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Mo Li, Li Feng, Jiang Jingtian, and the other physical experts stood at the front, pressing forward step by step. Little Yu used the Thunder God's lightning hammer to bombard the barrier. I will guide the lightning towards the opponent's barrier. Yi Qinghan shouted in a deep voice. What? Little Yu flew into the sky. Her long robe fluttered, and her slender legs shattered space. The Thunder God's lightning hammer attracted the lightning elements in the world, turning them into a terrifying lightning dragon and bombarding the barrier. Yi Qinghan mobilized the source of lightning and guided the lightning to cross the barrier formed by the power of the world. It directly bombarded the barrier where the army was gathered. It crazily tore apart the energy, and the internal order of the opponent's barrier was shattered. Bang! Yi Qinghan and the 100,000 soldiers erupted at the same time, forcibly shattering the opponent's barrier. What? A wave of air crashed into the Dragon God army at the outermost perimeter and halfway up the mountain. Many people died on the spot, and even more people were sent flying. The entrance was opened, and the Snow Realm army charged in under Yi Qinghan's lead. Shua! Divine spears suddenly shot out from the two wings of the 100,000 soldiers. They were like scythes that reaped lives. They tore apart divine armors and destroyed the corporeal bodies. Following that, their souls were obliterated by the army behind. Boom! Yi Qinghan led them like a world-piercing spear, unstoppable, reaping the lives in front of them. Long Ziyue and Sky Marshal Supreme, the two great commanders, were unable to take the lead. Once they died, the army behind them would be completely disrupted. They could only reluctantly give up the 100,000 soldiers at the front and gather the 580,000 soldiers at the back to retreat 1 li. They immediately arranged the troops and attacked the Snow Realm army head-on, not allowing a large number of troops to rush out of the Tong Tian Gorge. The 100,000 Dragon God army at the front was brutally suppressed. However, if they didn't kill the sneak attackers, those who stubbornly resisted would definitely die. Moreover, they would die very miserably. After wiping out the 100,000 soldiers, the Snow Realm army's morale was high. Just as they were about to charge at the enemy, the Dragon God army and Sky Marshal army's hundreds of thousands of crossbow bolts shot out, covering the sky and covering the earth. They were caught off guard and instantly lost several thousand Snow Realm army elites. Boom boom boom. Yi Qinghan, Jiang Jingtian and the others quickly soared into the sky. Their long blades cut through the clouds and cut off the crossbow bolts. Their spears disrupted thousands of crossbow bolts, forming a huge arrow rain vortex. More and more crossbow bolts went out of control, saving the lives of the Snow Realm army. What? Yi Qinghan held the Inshur's pot in his left hand and released a beam of light, sucking all the arrows into the Inshur's pot. However, a portion of the arrows were very fast and violent. They only deviated from their trajectory and still shot into the Snow Realm army, causing a lot of losses. Follow me and kill. Shurgus smashed out a brick. It became bigger and bigger, covering half the sky. He wanted to suppress the Dragon God army at the front. At this time, the army at the back also rushed out of the Tong Tian Gorge and surrounded the army. Falcon Troop and Kuang Zong turned into sharp blades and scattered the arrangement of the two great commanders. The rich experience of the two great commanders was useless. They could only rely on their individual strength. The generals were used as pawns and were not of much use. Instead, they were surrounded by Kuang Zong and Falcon Troop. Chapter 1388. The 1 million scattered soldiers did not know how to fight. They only knew how to kill anyone they saw. 30 to 50 people surrounded one person and hacked at him. Even a tiger could not hold up against so many wolves. Soon, the army was completely scattered. The Tianwu army and the Dragon army were stunned by Yi Qinghan's insane sect and the Hunting Eagle army. Even the two extreme generals could not stop them. Yi Qinghan gave up on trying to surround the two extreme generals because they were too strong. Instead of surrounding him, it was better to scatter the army. At this time, the Tianwu army and Long Ziyue chased after Yi Qinghan. They were furious and wanted to crush him. However, Yi Qinghan kept dodging and madly attacking the army. He was like a human bulldozer. His long sword swept the ground like a tiger among sheep. Boom! The two extreme generals surrounded Yi Qinghan, but each time, they accidentally injured their own people. The army was scattered even more. When Long Ziyue and the Tianwu army were almost done venting their anger, they looked at their own army and saw that it had completely sunk into the sea. 30 to 50 people surrounded one person. The situation was completely one-sided. After the army was scattered, the insane sect and the hunting eagle army gathered in front of them. Their pseudo-world weapons shone brightly. It was a shocking sight. How long had it been before the million-strong army was destroyed? The three of them were among the strongest generals, but they had been beaten back to their original state in the sky-passing gorge. They were miserable. They hated Yi Qinghan to the core. But it was useless. The insane sect had so many elites and so many pseudo-world weapons. They could be killed if they surrounded them. Retreat. Retreat at all costs. Retreat to the central state. Woo, 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 the bugle horn for retreat sounded, and it shook the 9 states. Boom. The two extreme generals worked together to unleash a sword attack. Their aura soared through the galaxy as they attacked the army. They hoped that the army could work together to resist and give the Dragon Army and the Tianwu Army a chance to escape. Sure enough, the sharp sword aura forced the army to work together to resist. The remaining two armies had less than 200,000 people left. They quickly fled toward the central state. There was no way Yi Qinghan would allow these two supreme elites to behave so atrociously. He looked at each other and stepped forward. His pseudo-world weapon tore through space and time to attack the two great elites. Long Ziyue and the other man only resisted for a moment before quickly retreating. The army galloped forward, taking advantage of their victory to pursue the enemy. The beginning of the battle at Sky-Split Gorge represented the official start of the war between the two worlds. News of the victory at Sky-Split Gorge spread to the rear, causing the 9th Prince to be incomparably excited. This was a political achievement. The previous emperor had ascended the throne for tens of thousands of years and had not made any great achievements, but he had just ascended the throne and his generals had already made great contributions. Men, pass down my orders. Promote the Left Marshal to a new title. Give him the title of Left Divine King, and the Absolute Marshal the title of Absolute Sovereign King. Reward him with 100,000 snow step divine stones and 100 beauties. Reward the three armies and strive for a complete victory in the war of the ultimate martial realm. Spread the divine might of my snow dynasty. The 9th Prince was overjoyed. He gathered all the civil and military officials and said this in a high-profile manner. Xue Fei heard that he was going to give 2 different titles, but she did not object. In her eyes, Zhuofeng was her man. He deserved everything he got. If it wasn't for the fact that the throne of the dynasty belonged to her own son, she would probably want to abolish the emperor and set up a new one. Those old bastards of the imperial family only knew that the war between the two worlds had begun when they heard that the emperor was going to give a different title. They were originally very angry, but when they found out that the reason for the war was the invasion of the ultimate martial realm and that they had achieved a complete victory, they relaxed. An old man of the imperial family came out of seclusion and sat on the throne. The 9th Prince stood there respectfully, not daring to show any disrespect. This old man was much older than the previous emperor. He had once been the emperor and was called Emperor Shui Yan. However, he was focused on cultivation and gave the throne to his descendants. It was passed down for a few generations before it reached the hands of the previous emperor. Now that it was in the hands of the 9th Prince, even if the old man wanted to abolish him, he and Xue Fei would not dare to say anything. Old ancestor, how come you have time to come out? The 9th Prince bowed and asked tentatively, who is this Zhuofeng and Zhuoshui? Who were the ones who led the army to counterattack the ultimate martial realm? Why didn't you inform the elders of our clan about the war between the two worlds? Who is leading the Snow World Army now? Emperor Shui Yen asked coldly. The ninth prince felt a tingling pain in his spine. Emperor Shui Yen was too strong. His aura was monstrous. The moment he appeared, all the officials in the imperial court did not dare to make a sound. Old ancestor, Zhou Shui is the disciple of the city lord of Cloud City. His cultivation talent is top-notch. He has been following this brat since the beginning of the year. He is loyal and devoted to the country and has almost died a few times. This time, one of the military saints leading the army is Zhu Wu Exin. He is the right-hand man of 5th Imperial Uncle. The other one is Mr. Ling Yan's disciple, Yigu. You should have heard of them. The ninth prince immediately brought out Yigu. Emperor Shui Yen did not give anyone face, but he had to give Ling Yan face. Yigu represented Ling Yan. With him leading the army, Emperor Shui Yen would not make things difficult for him. As for the one leading the Snow World Army, it is this brat's 9th Imperial Uncle, Emperor Shui Jihuang. 5th Imperial Uncle was assassinated by Divine Sect's sect master. He even wanted to kill me. If it wasn't for Mr. Zhu's protection, I'm afraid I would have died. In the end, 9th Imperial Uncle was alerted and he led the army to destroy Divine Sect. The 9th prince immediately pushed all the responsibility to the Divine Lord. He did not dare to say that all of this was planned by Yi Qinghan. Divine Sect was destroyed? Emperor Shui Yen frowned. But when he heard that Divine Sect's sect master dared to assassinate a prince of the imperial family and the commander of the Snow World Army, he immediately smiled coldly. He deserved to die. When God Lord Jiang returns, I will personally explain to him. Emperor Shui Yen said coldly. Thank you, old ancestor, for your understanding. Old ancestor is wise. The 9th prince was overjoyed and immediately knelt down. Less nonsense. Tell me the situation at the front lines and the attitudes of the citizens. Emperor Shui Yen said in a low voice. As a former emperor, he thought far more than the 9th prince. News just came from the front lines. In the Battle of Tong Tian Gorge, Marshal Zhou, Marshal Zhu and Mr. Jigu worked together and defeated the Wuji Army, Dragon Army and Sky Marshal Army. They killed close to 600,000 enemies and captured 100,000. Only 200,000 soldiers escaped under the lead of Sun Yang, Sovereign Sky Marshal and Long Ziwe. Our side won. The 9th prince was extremely excited, as if he was the one who led the battle. Emperor Shui Yen was a bit surprised. It was impossible for him not to know Sun Yang, Sovereign Sky Marshal and Long Ziwe. They were all peak existences of the older generation and had more experience in leading troops than Emperor Shui Jihuang. They could be considered as military experts. Although they were a bit weaker than military saints, they shouldn't have been defeated by 3 juniors and suffered such heavy losses. What kind of advantage did the 3 of them use to win? This emperor is a bit curious. Emperor Shui Yen muttered to himself, as if he was asking the 9th prince. The 9th prince said proudly, Old ancestor, you don't know. Mr. Jigu has received the true teachings of Mr. Ling Yan. Zhu Wuxin is also known as a military saint. He only lacks actual combat experience when leading troops. The Zhuo martial residence has many experts and has even collected 5 extreme Dao pseudo-world artifacts. With them, no matter how great the advantage was, it would still be destroyed. They are strong in leading troops, but after being scattered, they would still be a useless army. Chapter 1389. Emperor Shui Yen was a bit shocked. The left martial residence had actually collected 5 extreme pseudo-world weapons. How lucky was that? Emperor Shui Yen sank into deep thought. His eyes flickered as he thought of something. Pass down my order. Let Zhuo Feng and Ji Gu fight their way to the center of the ultimate martial realm, the Fu Tian state. Then, negotiate with them to get the most profit. Then, let him give me 2 extreme pseudo-world weapons. I need them, Emperor Shui Yen said indifferently as if the pseudo-world weapons were his. 9th prince's mouth twitched. He wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't dare to refute. What? You don't want to? Emperor Shui Yen frowned and asked. No. Forefather, it is a time of war. Bringing back the pseudo-world weapons from the front lines is a bit. Ninth Prince smiled bitterly. Even he felt that it was too much to ask for pseudo-world weapons. Could Yi Qinghan give them to him? But what? I want to go out and need pseudo-world weapons. Just give the order. I will wait to use them, Emperor Shui Yan said coldly. Ninth Prince didn't dare to refute. He could only lower his head and accept the scolding. Then he issued an imperial decree to ask for pseudo-world weapons from the front lines. At the front lines, the army was already cleaning up the battlefield. The ordinary army had lost close to 300,000 men while the Snow Kingdom army had lost less than 50,000 men. It could be seen how big the difference between an ordinary army and a trained army was and how important teamwork was. Supreme gods were indeed very strong. One thought was enough to kill an ordinary giant god. However, when dozens of powerful giant gods were gathered together, their attacks were unified and orderly. They were well-trained and could turn the situation around. This was the role of an army. No matter how strong a single soldier king was, without the support of pseudo-world weapons, Yi Qinghan would be exhausted to death in an army even if he had the feather spirit clothes. Meanwhile, in Extreme Dao City, he was training his soldiers with paper spears. His movements were bold, and his aura soared into the sky. It shook the hearts of people. The way he trained his soldiers showed his boldness and courage. 2 million soldiers were being trained at the same time, and the results of a night of hard work could be seen. This time, at least several thousand paramount gods had been recruited. They were either unaffiliated cultivators or members of mid-tier factions. They didn't have powerful sources of secret arts, nor were they able to buy better resources. Therefore, they could only join the army to gain more resources. Yi Qinghan ordered his men to occupy the Heavenly Gorge stronghold, then led his army back to Extreme Path City to rest. Standing on the city wall, he looked at Ji Gu, who was currently training his troops. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. As expected, there was always someone better than him. Just based on the imposing manner and boldness of his soldiers, he could tell that Ji Ji's attitude towards killing was even more ruthless than Zhu Wuxin's. His actions were decisive. On the battlefield, he was definitely a demon-like existence. Zhu Wuxin also stared fixedly at the army that covered the mountains and plains below the city walls. He looked at their arrangement and their movements. The army did not stick to the rules and did not completely follow Ling Yan's train of thought in the past. He mixed in too many of his own thoughts and ideas. He was bold and decisive, extracting the essence and discarding the dross. As long as the war continued for 30 to 50 years, causing the 9 lands to be in complete chaos, there was no doubt that Ji Gu would surpass his master Ling Yan. Compared to him, how do you feel about yourself? Yi Qinghan glanced at Zhu Wuxin and asked indifferently. My hands and feet are tied. I don't have enough boldness and my killing heart isn't strong enough. Zhu Wuxin was sincerely convinced. He didn't feel ashamed. Instead, he felt excited. Only with motivation could one improve. Yi Qinghan nodded and reminded him truthfully, your heart isn't ruthless enough. You don't have enough boldness. I suggest that if you have a goal in mind, even if there are mountains of blades and seas of fire ahead, even if you can kill more than half of your army, even if you can slaughter the common people, as long as you can complete the mission, you must unswervingly carry it out. Thank you for your reminder, mister. Zhu Wuxin nodded firmly. A soldier must die on the battlefield. A general's success is built on the bones of thousands. If you can't do this, then don't talk nonsense about the military saints. No matter if it's Ling Yan or Yan Ao, as military saints, they all stepped on the corpses of their brothers to reach their current position, Yi Qinghan said indifferently. Zhu Wuxin was slowly transforming. His heart was also slowly solidifying. The will in his eyes soared to the heavens. Zhu Wuxin's heart was surging with battle intent. His heart was like a battlefield. The bigger the heart, the bigger the battlefield. Looking at the world, taking into account all the factors, using the same principle to deal with all changes. If he could completely annihilate the enemy, even if the mountains were covered with bones and seas of blood, he wouldn't hesitate. Only then could he be a military saint. Looking at Zhu Wuxin's transformation, Yi Qinghan's expression was somewhat complicated. He didn't know if he should nurture him or take the opportunity to kill him. You admire Mr. Yan-ao? Yi Qinghan stared at Zhu Wuxin and asked in a low voice. Yes. Mister, I have studied the classic battle between Mr. Yan-ao and Mr. Ling Yan since I was young. I respect him very much. Although he is from the Great Wasteland domain, a soldier is not guilty. Furthermore, he was defending himself and didn't take the initiative to invade. I feel that he is more worthy of respect than Mr. Ling Yan, Zhu Wuxin replied firmly. Yi Qinghan's brows twitched. He asked in a hoarse voice, if Yan-ao returns and raises his army to take revenge, unifying the 9 realms, there will no longer be any division between the 9 realms. Will you resist or support him? Zhu Wuxin stared blankly. His heart was in a mess. After a long time, he faintly sighed, Mr. Yan-ao is no longer here. If I can see Mr., I will definitely kneel down to become your disciple and follow you. You can become the new generation of Yan-ao. Although his physical body is dead, his soul is immortal. You are the inheritor of his soul. Yi Qinghan stared at Zhu Wuxin and said in a hoarse voice. Zhu Wuxin trembled and clenched his 10 fingers. Do you want to know about Yan-ao's past? Yi Qinghan looked at Zhu Wuxin's struggling heart and asked in a low voice. Zhu Wuxin looked expectantly at Yi Qinghan and curiously asked, You know about it? Yi Qinghan silently nodded. He stretched out his hand and grabbed 2 chairs. Sit down. Let's have a chat today. Zhu Wuxin was like a curious baby. He was like a well-behaved student who had a strong thirst for knowledge. He sat in front of Yi Qinghan and looked expectantly at Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan slowly sat down. He looked at the twinkling stars in the sky and seemed to have sunk into a deep thought. He said in a hoarse voice, Yan-ao was born in an ordinary scholarly family. He wholeheartedly read the books of the sages and was unwilling to kill an ant. Back then, when the imperial court of the Great Wasteland domain was selecting civil officials, they had to pass a written exam and obtain the approval of the Great Wasteland's father to become a noble. Back then, Yan-ao obtained first place in the written exam and went to the Great Wasteland Palace to meet the Great Wasteland's father. When he first saw the Great Wasteland's father, he was very surprised. He seemed to think that the Great Wasteland's father was a benevolent old man. He did not expect that the Great Wasteland's father was a resolute young man. His eyes were very cold and emotionless. However, the things he did were very gentle and treated his people well. At that time, he did not understand the Great Wasteland's master and wanted to leave the Great Wasteland Palace to find his own life. Do you know what the Great Wasteland's master did? Yi Qinghan looked at Zhu Wuxin's intoxicated expression and asked with a faint smile. What did he do? Zhu Wuxin seemed to have seen the scene from back then and immediately asked. Chapter 1390. The army on the city wall seemed to treat Yi Qinghan as a storyteller. One after another, they surrounded Yi Qinghan. Some of them were half kneeling, some of them were sitting down. All of them were obediently listening. Yi Qinghan did not disperse them. Instead, he pondered and said, Back then, when the master of the great wilderness looked at Yan-ao's written exam, his words were majestic and ambitious. Although it was just a written exam, he had the imposing manner of a soldier on a punitive expedition. With a wave of his hand, he mobilized tens of thousands of troops. With a single sentence, he had the momentum of breaking through heaven's secrets. The only thing he lacked was a bit of ruthlessness. When he looked at the cultured and refined Yan-ao, his eyes were filled with admiration. He hoped that he could keep Yan-ao in order to obtain benefits for the people of the great wilderness. However, Yan-ao did not seem to want to stay. He could only bring Yan-ao to the most barren land of the great wilderness. The great wilderness. It's a place that people yearn for. It's beautiful, full of spiritual energy, beautiful mountains and limpid waters. The people there are kind and talented. Everything started from the great wilderness. People are born with a kind nature, which is a portrayal of the great wilderness. They are not as evil as the legends of the 7 realms say. It's only because they are too powerful that they threaten the rule of some people. They are innocent, maybe they have different bloodlines, maybe they have different beliefs, but the great wilderness was not hostile to the other 7 realms in the beginning. Just like the Chaos realm, they wanted to take care of the weak, but they underestimated the jealousy of the people of the world. Yi Qinghan looked up to the sky and whispered. His voice was hoarse and deep. It was very magnetic. What he said was completely different from what the Snow Realm army had been taught. However, no one refuted him. They seemed to believe him without a doubt and were looking forward to what he would say next. Yi Qinghan seemed to feel that he had digressed from the topic. After a moment of silence, he whispered again. The master of the great wilderness took Yen Ao and left the great wilderness realm. He brought them to the other 8 realms, including the weakest primal chaos realm. He let him see the difficulties of the people of the world. He hoped that Yen Ao could stay and help the great wilderness and its people. Yen Ao wavered and chose to stay. However, what he did was not write a declaration of war with a red brush in his hand, nor did he write a memorial. The master of the great wilderness sent Yen Ao to the great wilderness Yellow Sand Army and started as a military advisor of 10,000 men. However, Yen Ao was too soft-hearted and would vomit even when he saw blood and bones. He was unwilling to stay in the army anymore. The blood covered his peerless eyes and sealed his bold and unrestrained heart. From then on, he was unable to recover from the setback. The master of the great wilderness agreed. However, he asked him to fight until the end of the war. That was the battle of pride. The opponent of that battle was not an outsider, but the master of the great wilderness. He hid his identity and personally led 30,000 slaves to surround the army that Yen Ao was in at the great wilderness realm's boundary river. He arranged the soldiers in a battle formation. Just like Mr. Jigu, he did not give Yen Ao the slightest chance. As long as Yen Ao was defeated or retreated, the hundreds of thousands of villagers behind him would die. Although the battle seemed hopeless, as long as Yen Ao was willing to open the boundary river's boundary river and use the river water to wash away the 30,000 enemy troops, he would be able to save the hundreds of thousands of villagers behind him. The master of the great wilderness forced Yen Ao to be ruthless. He also told him that if he killed the 30,000 soldiers, he would be able to save the hundreds of thousands of villagers behind him. Although war is killing, it is also protecting. Only then can the world be at peace. However, Yen Ao disappointed the master of the great wilderness. He did not choose to open the boundary river's boundary river. Instead, he chose to take the risk and use 10,000 soldiers to cover the hundreds of thousands of civilians as they retreated. The master of the great wilderness was very angry. He led his army and slaughtered the hundreds of thousands of civilians. Blood flowed like a river. Even the boundary river was dyed red. Everyone held their breath. Even Zhu Wuxin's pupils contracted. He did not expect the master of the great wilderness to be so cruel. Yi Qinghan grinned. His smile was filled with bitterness and sorrow. He said with a hoarse voice, "The master of the great wilderness is very cruel and brutal, isn't he?" Zhu Wuxin and the rest of the Snow Realm army could not help but nod their heads. Indeed, the master of the great wilderness is very cruel and brutal. He massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians, killed the 10,000 soldiers under Yen Ao's command, humiliated the corpses of the captains of his legion, humiliated the corpses of the civilians and the soldiers. However, he did not kill Yen Ao. He forced him to kneel on the ground and looked on helplessly as the army humiliated the civilians and humiliated the corpses of the soldiers. The master of the great wilderness hid in the rear and looked on as the slave army humiliated the civilians of the great wilderness. He hid in a corner and wept bitterly. However, when he saw Yen Ao's furious eyes, he did not regret it in the slightest. Now, in order to stimulate Yen Ao's fighting spirit and nurture his temperament, he killed so many civilians. However, if Yen Ao can become a military saint, he will be able to save hundreds of millions of people. Yen Ao returned to the Grand Desolation Palace like an evil ghost. Before he could say anything, the master of the Grand Desolation Palace expelled him from the army. He knelt in front of the Grand Desolation Palace and begged for 3 months, hoping that the master of the Grand Desolation Palace would give him another chance. He hoped that he could use his entire life to atone for his crime and benefit the Grand Desolation Palace. Zhuoshui, Mr. Yen Ao was not as good as you at that time. He was more soft-hearted and his words were bold and unrestrained. However, when he did things, he was unable to let go. Because of this incident, his heart and spirit fused together. Like the tip of his pen, he became the military saint of the Grand Desolation Palace. When everyone heard this, they felt as if they had seen Yen Ao's transformation. They wished that they could also transform to that extent. Mr. Are you very familiar with Mr. Yen Ao? Can you tell us more about him? Zhu Wuxin asked expectantly. Yi Qinghan's narration was like a storyteller. His voice was hoarse and sharp. His words were filled with temptation. The snow border army on the city wall were entranced by his narration. Their minds rippled as they wished to hear more stories about Yen Ao. Perhaps, they even wished to hear more stories about Yen Ao. Yi Qinghan faintly smiled. Looking at the red clouds on the horizon, it was as if he could see the scene of Yen Ao's last battle. His blood dyed the battlefield and he didn't retreat even in the face of death. His smile was filled with bitterness and sadness, causing the tip of people's nose to turn sour. Yen Ao, he was a legend. If his cultivation was high enough, he would have been in existence that surpassed the master of the wasteland. Unfortunately, he died at such a young age. The heavens were jealous of heroic geniuses. Perhaps it's just him. Yen Ao fought thousands of small battles in his life, which laid the foundation for him to become the commander-in-chief of the Great Wasteland Army. From the position of a small army's military advisor, he climbed all the way to the position of the commander-in-chief of the Great Wasteland Army. He transformed from a soft-hearted scholar to a resolute and ruthless soldier in a short span of 10,000 years. 10,000 years. To us, it might be the time for seclusion, but it was his glorious life. I admire him very much and respect him very much. It's a pity that I won't be able to see him. Otherwise, I would definitely invite him for a drink. Yi Qinghan faintly said. In the past, he was inferior to all of you, and even more inferior to the commander-in-chief. What he could do, all of you can do the same. When all of you have feelings in your heart, you can kill millions of people. When your goal is to save millions of people, all of you will be the next Yen Ao, the saints of the military. Yi Qinghan's words were sonorous and forceful. His words shook everyone's heart. However, he didn't know that his words tonight would turn the several thousand people on the city wall into the main force of the Snow Realm Army in the future. All of them would become the backbone of the captains and even the commander-in-chief. They would contribute an indelible strength to the unification of the 9 realms in the future. Everyone still wanted to continue, but the sky was already bright. A group of people appeared outside the city wall. They were holding an imperial edict in their hands and were heading straight for Extreme Path City. Thank you to Piao Hong of Sai Song and Flourish of the World for your tips. Thank you to everyone for your recent tips and subscriptions. Especially the next chapter. Chapter 1391. A group of men and horses appeared below the city wall. They were very fast, and the leader was a bodyguard of the 9th prince. His cultivation was not bad, and he was a supreme god called Shui Long. Yi Qinghan had seen him a few times before. Shui Long was very respectful of Yi Qinghan. He got off his horse and walked to the city wall. He ran to the top of the city wall and bowed. Left Marshal, Emperor Shui Yen of the royal family has come out of seclusion. He knows that you have an extreme Dao pseudo-world artifact and asked His Majesty to give you 2 as tribute. His Majesty does not dare to disobey, so he asked me to inform you. Yi Qinghan frowned. He was very angry. The front line was fighting to the death. This Emperor Shui Yen was too shameless. He actually wanted to take away 2 pseudo-world weapons. Not to mention that they were in a war. Even in peacetime, they would not give their pseudo-world weapons to others. Zhu Wuxin was also very angry. This kind of request actually came from the royal family's clan elder. Go back and tell him that the army cannot leave the pseudo-world artifact for now. If he needs the pseudo-world artifact, then use the royal family's treasure. This pseudo-world artifact is my personal weapon, and I will not give it to anyone. Yi Qinghan replied coldly. Shui Long's expression was awkward. He did not dare to offend Yi Qinghan, so naturally he could not pass on Yi Qinghan's words to Emperor Shui Yen. He could only smile bitterly and leave. He organized his words and told Emperor Shui Yan to give up. After rejecting Emperor Shui Yan's request, Jigu defeated the extreme martial army's attack. They lost a lot of new soldiers, but their cooperation was getting better and better. After that, the army set out to conquer the central province. They took down a dozen small cities and started to attack the central city. They were stopped by the Dragon Army led by Long Ziyue. They lost a lot of soldiers, but the central city also suffered heavy losses. The city walls were about to be broken. However, Long Ziyue, the Sky Martial Sovereign, and Sun Yang moved all of their troops to the central continent. Although they lost a lot of troops, their foundation was not damaged. Nearly 3 million troops formed a crescent shape and surrounded the Snow World Army. They wanted to force the Snow World Army out of the ultimate martial realm. Even Zhu Wuxin and Yi Qinghan took the initiative to cooperate. They controlled the left and right flanks of the army to stop the three armies from completely surrounding the Snow Jie army. The 6 marshals gathered in the central prefecture were definitely elites. They would definitely not be easy to fight. Both sides would suffer losses. The reinforcements of the Snow Border Army had not arrived yet. Jigu was somewhat impatient. He sent out more than 10 orders in a row, requesting the reinforcements in the rear to speed up the process and provide more soldiers and resources. However, what he received was not reinforcements. Instead, it was an order from Emperor Shui Yan. He demanded that commanders would deliver the 2 extreme pseudo-world weapons from Guqin Yu and Little Yu back to Holy City. Furthermore, Emperor Shui Yan cut off the supplies and personally guarded the border. Even Emperor Shui Jiahuang did not have the qualifications to mobilize the Snow World Army to threaten Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan clenched his fist and roared hoarsely, "Motherfucker, this idiot was actually an emperor. Was his brain crushed by a door? In order to get the pseudo-world weapons, he actually ignored the big picture." Only now did Jigu understand why the reinforcements and supplies had not arrived. It turned out that the Snow Fire Emperor wanted to take away the 2 great pseudo-world weapons. There was no need to say how powerful these pseudo-world weapons were during the war. If it was not for the 5 great pseudo-world weapons, how could the 3 million recruits and the 300,000 Snow Realm soldiers that he led resist the 3 great trump cards of the ultimate martial realm? Jigu looked at the confidant sent by Emperor Shui Yan acting so arrogant. He slapped him and pointed at the middle-aged man's nose and scolded, "Motherfucker, I am fighting at the front lines. It's fine if Emperor Shui Yan does not support me, but he actually dares to drag me down. Go back and tell him that if he wants the pseudo-world weapons, tell him to personally come to the front lines and ask me for them. If he does not dare to come, then tell him to scram. If he dares to cut off the supplies of resources and soldiers again, I will go back and kill him." That middle-aged man covered his face and looked at Jigu angrily. He did not expect him to be so overbearing and crazy. There was some disbelief in his eyes, but he did not realize that the cold light in Yi Qinghan's eyes had already condensed into substance. "Scram. If I do not see the supplies of resources and soldiers in 5 days, I will show you." Jigu was not polite and did not give Emperor Shui Yan any face. So what if Emperor Shui Yan's status was high? In terms of seniority, only the Realm Lord and a few Supreme Clan elders were higher in seniority than him. This was because Ling Yan and the Realm Lord were brothers. The middle-aged man representing Emperor Shui Yan was incomparably angry, but he did not dare to say anything. Otherwise, Jigu would throw him to the front lines. For the time being, there was no supply of soldiers and supplies. Jigu, Yi Qinghan and Zhu Wuxin discussed for a while. They had no choice but to withdraw the army and hand over the cities that they had previously conquered. They temporarily retreated to the Tong Tian Gorge and used the natural barrier as a defensive point to temporarily maintain their advantage. In the desolate border city, Emperor Shui Yan was even more furious. This was because the middle-aged man had exaggerated the words of Jigu and Yi Qinghan by several times for Emperor Shui Yan to hear. "Arrogant brat. If it wasn't for Mr. Ling Yan's face, this emperor would have already killed you. Now you dare to insult this emperor's dignity like this. Since you want resources and military supplies, this emperor will let you completely give up on this idea." Emperor Shuijiawang's eyes flashed coldly as he shouted, "Men, seal the border city's border river. Do not allow a single soldier to enter the Snow Empire's divine realm. Old ancestor, you cannot." "I will not agree. Right now, I am the commander of the Snow Empire's army. If you want to seize power, you have to at least go through the clan elders and take away my right to command." Emperor Shuijiahuang was somewhat angry. He did not expect Emperor Shui Yan to become more muddle-headed as he grew older. For the pseudo-world artifact, in order to enter the danger zone to find a stronger life saint medicine, he did not hesitate to give up Ji Gu and Ju Wu Exin, this kind of military sage. He even killed the commander of the Snow Empire's army, the assistant minister Sui Shui. "You unfilial son. They dare to insult me like this. You actually want to speak up for them?" Emperor Shui Yan sternly reprimanded. Murderous intent filled the border city. Nearly 10 million soldiers had been recruited and trained for more than 10 days. Although they were not as strong as a regular army, their cultivation was strong and they could come to the rescue at any time. However, they were blocked outside the city and could not enter, let alone cross the border river. They were very anxious, but they did not dare to offend Emperor Shui Yan and could only wait patiently. Emperor Shuijiahuang did not budge an inch. He did not agree to seal the border because that was equivalent to giving up 3 million soldiers, 3 military sages, and 5 extreme pseudo-world artifacts. Old ancestor, Zhou Shui definitely did not mean to blaspheme the imperial family's prestige. Right now, the front line is very tight and the pseudo-world artifact is very important. It can be used as an independent army. Naturally, he would not give it to you right now. However, once the war is over, he will naturally satisfy you. Why are you in such a hurry?" Emperor Shuijiahuang earnestly advised. However, Emperor Shui Yan could not wait anymore because his life could not wait that long. Chapter 1392. Snow Fire Emperor was once injured, and his lifespan was not that long. He often had to go to some dangerous places to find divine medicine to prolong his life, but some places were not that easy to enter, and it was not easy to come out either. Divine Nation did have a pseudo-world artifact, but it needed to be kept in the clan as a clan protection treasure. Without the clan elder's permission, he could not use it. He did not care about the death of the Snow Realm army. Now, he only wanted to obtain 2 pseudo-world artifacts and enter some dangerous places he had never entered before to take away the powerful divine medicine to prolong his life. In the end, the border was completely sealed, and even Snow 9 Emperor could not stop them. With the border sealed, Yi Qinghan, Ji Gu, and the others were completely furious. This was not just a hindrance, it was a hindrance to their waste. This was forcing them to their deaths. The matter of the border being sealed was quickly investigated by Marshal Saint Sky and the others. They immediately laughed. Snow Nation and Divine Realm were not as united as one. Sun Yang, Marshal Saint Sky, and Long Ziyue mobilized close to 10 million ordinary soldiers from the Wuji army. They wanted to completely defeat the Snow Realm army led by Yi Qinghan and Ji Gu between Tong Tian Gorge and Extreme Dao City. Looking at the earth-shaking army, Yi Qinghan, Ji Gu, and Zhu Wuxin sat in the main hall with heavy expressions. Without soldiers and resources, they were fighting alone in the extreme martial realm. Even with the pseudo-world artifact, they were powerless and could easily be wiped out by the army. Build ships, disguise as the Wuji army, cross the Wuji River, and ambush the true martial realm. Let the true martial realm army come to support us. Yi Qinghan thought for a moment and said, after the 2 battles at the Sky-Connecting Gorge and the one at the Desolate City, they had captured a total of 200,000 soldiers, including 50,000 soldiers from the Heavenly Martial Army, 120,000 soldiers from the Wuji Army, and 50,000 soldiers from the Dragon God Army. Yi Qinghan had unified the restrictive seal and conscripted 200,000 ordinary soldiers. They were dressed in the armor of the Wuji Army and were cutting down giant trees beside the Wuji River. They were madly building large ships while Zhang Gu was defending the southern region of Extreme Dao City. He was bold in his actions, and his disposition of troops was superior to Zhu Wuxin's. He could obstruct the enemy on a large scale while Zhu Wuxin could defend the Sky-Connecting Gorge. He could delay the enemy for at least 10 days. Yi Qinghan found Lu Zhantian and had him lead this army. The final outcome of this army was that not a single one of them would survive. Only Lu Zhantian would be able to leave the battlefield safely. Yi Qinghan spread out the map and explained the plan in detail. He pointed to the vicinity of Extreme Dao City and said, "You delay for 15 days while Brother Lu and I lead the army to ambush the true martial realm. In the end, we will give up half of the army and flee back to the border of the ultimate martial realm. Presumably, the true martial realm will lead the army to chase after us. At that time, you will immediately retreat to Extreme Dao City and give the other cities and the border of the Wuji River to the ultimate martial realm's army. Let them besiege you, and I will retreat to 300 li outside of Extreme Dao City. When I get close to the ultimate martial realm's army, I will change direction and lead the remaining troops to fight the true martial realm's army to the death." Zhang Gun nodded in agreement with the plan, but the timing had to be precise. Otherwise, it would not be the true martial realm joining hands to besiege the ultimate martial realm, but the true martial realm and the ultimate martial realm joining hands to besiege them. Let's discuss the time and follow the plan step by step. We cannot make a single mistake. No matter how much we lose, we must attack or retreat according to the precise time. The three of them memorized the plan by heart. After the plan was completed, the 200,000 slave soldiers and 200,000 ordinary soldiers had already built 10 large ships. Each ship could hold 40 to 50,000 soldiers, which was enough to transport these 400,000 soldiers to the true martial realm. Lu Zhantian commanded the army, and Yi Qinghan disguised himself as an ordinary soldier to follow Lu Zhantian. One day later, the army had already set off. These 400,000 soldiers would certainly not return. If they did not give up these 400,000 people, the remaining 2 million soldiers would undoubtedly die. They could either compromise with Emperor Shui Yan, admit their guilt, and offer up the pseudo-world weapon. However, it was impossible for Yi Qinghan to give up the pseudo-world weapon. He could only take the risk, and it just so happened that he could drag the true martial realm down with him. Just like what Yi Qinghan had said last night, if one had feelings, but was able to step on the bones of hundreds of thousands or even millions of brothers to save more people, he could be the next military saint. Although Yi Qinghan mainly focused on individual combat power, his ability to lead an army was definitely not inferior to Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin, because his state of mind was there. The 400,000 soldiers were promised that as long as they survived this battle, the slave soldiers could leave, and they could also formally follow him. As for the ordinary soldiers of the Snow Country, they could obtain the profound knowledge of the supreme divine technique. They did not know that they had been abandoned, and some people were destined to have a tragic ending. Wah wah wah. At night, the Wuji River was swaying with starlight. The Wuji River was 3,000 miles wide, and the 30-meter high fog above was the forbidden area. It was very dangerous on the river. Normally, the fog would be blown away by the wind, and it would easily fall to the lower level. That kind of poisonous gas was the nemesis of the giant gods, and even the supreme gods would be deeply affected by it. The 10 ships moved forward quickly, and the soldiers on the ships sat cross-legged. No one made a sound, and they just waited quietly. Yi Qinghan looked at the sky. The fog was boundless, and only a little starlight and moonlight shone down. There were some special fish in the river, and their meat was as tough as steel. They were huge, and they constantly rammed into the ships. Their fangs pierced through the outer layer of the ships, and the ships shook violently. "Throw the prepared flesh into the water," Lu Zhantian said in a deep voice. Swish, swish, swish. The army stood up and threw all the corpses they had prepared into the water. Flesh. Ka-ka-ka. Hiss, hiss, hiss. All kinds of tearing sounds and slapping sounds on the water were ear-splitting. The water splashed everywhere, and the army immediately released their divine power, forming a knot. Looking at the river surface, they saw countless carnivorous fish swimming from the bottom of the river, fighting for the corpses. Their fangs were as sharp as steel swords, and they were very sharp. Continue throwing. Boom, boom, boom. The army quickly threw large amounts of flesh into the water, attracting more and more carnivorous fish. Swish, swish, swish. Thousands of carnivorous fish were as big as humans, and when they jumped out from the water, they were actually 10 feet tall. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Yi Qinghan took out a sharp sword and pierced through the steel-like fish. Blood poured out, and the fish became even more restless. It was as if the river was overturning the sea, and it was incomparably terrifying. The water turned red, and the fish began to attack each other. The ship safely sailed through this terrifying area. The army's hair stood on end, and his body trembled slightly. He looked back at the crazy area in the distance, and the river surged more than 10 feet tall. There was fear in his eyes. Would it be so easy to return? Once they fell into the water, it would be strange if they were not swallowed whole. Where does this Wuji River lead to? How can such a strange fish live here? Lu Zhantian asked in surprise. Yi Qinghan lowered his voice and said, "This river leads to the Torn Impasse, and also to the Eastern Divine Sea. There are many strange creatures here, and they are very powerful. That's why this place is undefended all year round. Even the true force domain doesn't have a border army. We can drive straight in, and when we return, we can attack from the border passage." At this moment, the speed of the water in front of them was obviously different. It was as if the sea was surging, and a giant beast had appeared from the bottom of the water. Yi Qinghan's pupils constricted. He turned the bracelet into a huge crossbow and aimed at the bottom of the water. Chapter 1393. Yi Qinghan focused his gaze as he looked at the undulations in the depths of the river. Black shadows surged under the water as the opening crossbow in his hand was fully loaded. "Everyone, activate your godly power and set up a barrier. Do not let the ship break." What? The godly light enveloped the ship but could not tear apart the fog in the sky. The center of the Wuji River was as bright as the sun. The space was unstable and slightly distorted. The crossbow was aimed at the water surface as a beam of light shot out from his eyes. It was extremely frightening. The stalwart body was slightly distorted. Under everyone's gaze, the crossbow was almost torn apart. The army felt the danger and the ship swayed faster and faster. One could imagine how huge the demonic beasts in the river were. The army was filled with fear because the river was too dangerous. There was no chance of survival if one fell into it. One would die without a doubt. One would either be poisoned to death or devoured by countless carnivorous fishes. The army looked at Yi Qinghan in fear, especially the ordinary soldiers of the snow country. Most of them came here because of the name Zhou Shuai and revered him. They felt that Zhou Shuai was omnipotent and that he was the only one who could save the army. Just as everyone was panicking, Yi Qinghan released the arrow in his hand. The sharp arrow broke through the shackles and directly smashed into the water. Boom! What? The crossbow bolts broke through the surface of the water, creating huge waves that were tens of thousands of feet high. The ships were pushed back by the waves. A giant beast rushed out from the water. It was 100 feet tall and 1,000 feet long. It had a huge tail and a long neck. It weighed 100 tons and its body was like an uneven mountain. There were a few bony protrusions on its back. It was extremely cold and looked like a saber-toothed dragon, but it was more than 10 times larger. When it stood up, it was more than 30 meters tall. However, the fog above did not affect it at all. This beast was definitely not a native of the Wuji River. It either tore through the danger zone or came from the depths of the sea. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air as they looked up at the behemoth in horror. There was a sense of hopelessness in their hearts, as Yi Qinghan's ballista bolts had struck the behemoth's body, but they had only created sparks from the friction and then disappeared. The behemoth's external defenses were simply too strong. Even the overgods were unable to harm it, let alone the giant gods. The soldiers on the ship were even more useless because they were unable to deploy their troops. This is a bone-sword colossal dragon. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath. He did not expect to encounter such a tough nut to crack in such a small place. Everyone, move back 3 kilometers and maintain a safe distance. After Yi Qinghan finished speaking in a low voice, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and leaped into the air. The tip of his foot seemed to be stepping on the surface of the lake, but in reality he was only a few centimeters off the surface. The bone sword dragon roared angrily, stirring up a huge wave. Standing in front of Yi Qinghan, it was like a giant, and Yi Qinghan was like a tiny duck. There was no comparison at all. Yi Qinghan transformed his crossbow back into the 7-foot heavy berserker and leaped into the air. He maintained a certain distance from the mist and stared at the colossal beast. Most of the colossal beast's body was still submerged in the water, with only its long neck and back exposed. Its huge eyes stared fixedly at Yi Qinghan, seemingly curious as to why this tiny dot dared to face it head-on. The colossal beast stretched out its head and roared, stirring up a bloody storm and causing the divine robes to flap loudly. The 10 warships quickly retreated. Otherwise, they would easily capsize, and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers would be buried here. Swish! Yi Qinghan gripped the hilt of his saber with both hands and pointed it at the colossal beast. His cold aura was oppressive, carrying with it a sharp destructive power to intimidate the colossal beast, hoping that it would leave on its own. However, the colossal beast's eyes were filled with disdain, as if it was looking at an ant. It fiercely shook its head and used the steel needle-like bone spikes on its head to attack Yi Qinghan. Boom! Yi Qinghan slashed out with his saber, the veins all over his body bulging as he slammed into the bone spikes with lightning speed. Boom! The bone spikes were forcefully broken, and the blade collided with the colossal beast's neck. Like the friction between steel and steel, the sound produced was extremely ear-piercing, and sparks flew in all directions. The two boundless forces collided, causing the surrounding fog to surge in all directions. The colossal bone sword dragons had suffered a huge impact and was thrown back violently. It crashed into the water, causing a curtain of water to splash up as it slid several hundred meters under the water. Yi Qinghan's figure hurriedly retreated, his body twisting and staggering. For a short period of time, he was unable to control his body and could only fly backwards to reduce the impact. Swish! 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 Yi Qinghan stepped on the surface of the water like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He retreated all the way until he reached the warship, where he barely managed to stabilize his body. Phew! Yi Qinghan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His right hand trembled as he spread out his 5 fingers and circled them. He once again gripped the hilt of his saber and charged out once more, sending out thousands of attacks in a row. The saber radiance shot out in all directions, cutting through the curtain of water. It seemed like there was no order to it, but in reality his attacks were ruthless and merciless. He wanted to force the colossal beast to retreat. The colossal beast's body was huge and its defense was terrifying, but that did not mean that it did not feel pain. Yi Qinghan's strength was even more terrifying. A single slash might not be a threat, but if thousands of slashes landed on a single spot, even the strongest defense would collapse. Swish! 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 Yi Qinghan attacked like a madman, specifically targeting the colossal beast's neck. Although the neck was as thick as a water bucket, it was definitely the weakest part of the colossal beast's body. After thousands of attacks, the colossal beast's eyes were filled with anger and panic. This was because there were already wounds on its neck, and it could be chopped off by Yi Qinghan at any time. The colossal beast roared and moved its body, wanting to send Yi Qinghan flying. However, he was as fast as lightning, shuttling through the gaps between its attacks. The colossal beast could not do anything to him. The army was dumbfounded as they watched the attack miss by a hair's breadth. They were all sweating for him and could only secretly pray that Yi Qinghan could win. Swish! 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 Yi Qinghan soared into the sky and shuttled through the mist less than half a meter away. His blade soared through the air and once again slashed towards the colossal beast's neck. The colossal beast retracted its head, unable to bear Yi Qinghan's attacks. Yi Qinghan was too small for it, like a cannon hitting a mosquito. It could not hit him at all. In the end, it could only retreat back into the water and escape towards the depths of the sea. What? The army cheered loudly, incomparably excited. They seemed to have regarded Yi Qinghan as a true supreme god. However, they did not know that the person they worshipped was leading them to their deaths. Continue moving. Yi Qinghan returned to the ship expressionlessly. His arms were sore and powerless, and his entire body felt as if it had been hollowed out. No one knew how much divine power and physical strength he had used to achieve this seemingly easy victory. He looked at Lu Zhantian and said in a deep voice, "Be careful. The creatures here are very dangerous, and they are all carnivorous." However, after this battle, the colossal beasts did not dare to approach. The ship quickly approached the opposite shore, and the forest on the other side was clearly visible. Chapter 1394. Forests, high mountains, misty clouds, and overgrown thistles and thorns. It was not a place suitable for humans to live in. No wonder they did not use the border guards. The ship approached the shore, and the rocks on both sides of the ship could not be climbed. They were almost vertical, and only a small part of the ship was sloping. There were also overgrown weeds that contained many poisonous creatures. Yi Qinghan's eyes narrowed as he stared at one of the slopes. The peak was not high, but after releasing his divine sense, he discovered that there was a mountain path after this peak. Although it was not wide, it was enough for the army to move through. Shua! Yi Qinghan leapt up, and a sharp sword appeared in his hand. He accurately struck out a few hundred times, and the sword light tore apart the mountain peak and shot into the weeds, killing all the poisonous creatures that could threaten the army. He then stirred up the mist halfway up the mountain and led it away from the peak. Abandoned ship, advance. Yi Qinghan walked at the front and ordered the army to move forward quickly. The army of 500,000 quickly advanced to the opposite side of the mountain peak. They looked at the small path that was less than 10 meters wide. It was rugged and winding, and there were precipitous cliffs. The slightest carelessness would cause them to fall to the bottom of the cliff. 5 people in a row form a column. Military orders were like mountains. Although the path was difficult, no one hesitated and formed a long line. The army moved through the depths of the hills. There were no signs of human habitation, and even adventurers were rare. Powerful, vicious creatures were hiding in the distance, and their green eyes were especially dazzling in the night. However, they were afraid of the army and did not dare to charge over. Once a beast tide formed, Yi Qinghan would not be able to reverse the situation. Lu Zhantian's face was grave as he looked around vigilantly, afraid of being attacked. Yi Qinghan was not too worried. His body emitted a faint dragon's aura, and it was very condensed. It was like an ancient dragon walking, intimidating other giant beasts. Boom! A few giant creatures were wriggling as if they wanted to flatten a mountain. Their huge bodies crushed the ancient trees as they pounced towards the army. Yi Qinghan surrounded the army to prevent the rear from not being able to take care of them. He could only let Lu Zhantian lead the way while he stopped and stood at the top of the mountain to look down and guard the entire mountain. The winding mountain path extended all the way down. As long as one went down the mountain, there would be a wide road at the foot of the mountain. One could enter the heart of the mountain and reach the heart of the mountain. Once one reached the heart of the mountain, one could enter the ancient forest. There were no weeds in the forest. One of the giant beasts could no longer hold back and finally launched an attack, pouncing towards the army halfway up the mountain. The wings on the back of the giant beast were 10 meters long. When it spread its wings, it could move mountains and shake trees. It was incomparably terrifying. When it opened its bloody mouth, it could swallow at least hundreds of people. The great army was shocked. They threw out the spears in their hands, but they couldn't even break through its fur. They couldn't help but be horrified. Yi Qinghan transformed into a sharp sword that pierced through the clouds and shot down from the giant beast's head. His sword momentum was like a rainbow. Boom! Boom boom boom. Yi Qinghan's sword pierced through the giant beast's head and came out from its lower jaw. The giant beast let out a blood-curdling scream as it lost all signs of life. Its corpse fell like a kite with its string cut. After a long time, it smashed into the bottom of the mountain, breaking countless ancient trees. Dajuan was so shocked that his eyes went blank. He didn't know what to say. Swish! Yi Qinghan soared into the air and returned to his original position. He said in a low voice, "Continue on our way." Lu Zhantian saw this and couldn't help but sigh. The Yi Qinghan of the past had only been walking side by side with him. Now, he had already thrown him tens of thousands of miles away. His individual combat strength was inferior to his, and his leadership was inferior to his. The great army continued on their way. After Yi Qinghan killed the giant beast with one strike, the other giant beasts didn't dare to act recklessly. They steadily entered the main road below. Now that there was a main road, the great army sped up their progress. In one night, they entered the hinterland and actually discovered human adventurers. Moreover, their cultivation wasn't weak. Stop! Yi Qinghan's divine sense discovered the adventurers and immediately called for the great army to stop. What's wrong? Lu Zhantian asked curiously. There are quite a few adventurers. Their cultivation isn't weak, but they're scattered. The great army can't kill them. I'll go catch a giant beast and let it help us drive away this group of adventurers. Yi Qinghan left behind these words and returned to the depths alone. He caught a giant tiger beast and gave it a violent beating. It was so angry that it didn't dare to speak. It was as obedient as a kitten, allowing him to carry it back to the hinterland. Yi Qinghan threw it into the hinterland and said coldly, "Kill any humans you see. Don't leave a single one alive. If you dare to sneak away, I'll pluck all your tiger fur." The giant tiger beast flew into a rage out of humiliation, but it didn't dare to vent its anger on Yi Qinghan. It could only vent its anger on the other humans. This group of adventurers immediately exploded, causing the hinterland to be in chaos. The adventurers all fled to the periphery. A tiger's roar shook everyone, and no one dared to move. Especially the group of adventurers from the True Force domain. The strongest was only a giant god, but they were scattered. The great army could easily be discovered. With the giant tiger at the front, the great army rushed to the periphery unscrupulously. When they reached the periphery, even if the great army of the True Force domain discovered them, it would be impossible to block them in the mountains. Once they reached the plains, there was no border army nearby. Relying on the garrison of a city alone wouldn't have much of an impact. Yi Qinghan no longer cared. He led the great army to a city outside the mountains. Shaolin City was a city named after a powerhouse. Shaolin was the founder of this city. He was also a legend. He had a rather high status in the True Force domain. He held an important position in the imperial city and was deeply favored by the emperor. The Shao family was located here. The spiritual energy here was dense, and the mountains and rivers nourished people. It was a holy land. There were no enemies to harass them. Shaolin had placed his family here to reassure the royal family. Although this territory was good, it wasn't big. No matter how the Shao family developed, they wouldn't threaten the royal family. The Shao family had more than 30,000 direct descendants and more than 100,000 collateral descendants. This area was their territory, which was equivalent to a province. Shaolin City was the largest city in this area. There was a gate that led directly to the border of the Snow Country and the Divine World. Boom! The great army pressed on, and Shaolin City's expression changed. After all, there was no great army in the city. There were many women and children. They couldn't resist the great army at all. Shao Zun, the patriarch of the Shao family, was shocked. He came to the city wall and looked at the approaching great army. He asked sternly, "Where did this army come from?" "Report." Patriarch, looking at their clothes, "It's the ultimate martial domain's ultimate martial domain's ultimate martial domain army. They should have come from the depths of the ancient forest. It's very likely that they came along the ultimate martial river." A scout immediately rushed over and said, "How many?" Shao Zun immediately asked. "About 500,000. It's equivalent to half of the ultimate martial domain army. We can't resist at all." The scout quickly replied, "Quick, ask for help. Inform the patriarch." Shao Zun was shocked. If they couldn't stop them, the Shao family would be finished. However, when the great army reached the outskirts of the city, they didn't attack. The direct descendants of the Shao family all aimed their realm-opening crossbows at the great army. Their eyes were filled with panic. Yi Qinghan whispered to Lu Zhantian, "Tell them that our target is the Snow Country and the Divine World." Tell them to open the city. Otherwise, we'll massacre everyone in the city. Xiao Zun obviously didn't believe it. Naturally, he wouldn't open the city gates. He immediately said coldly, "The ultimate martial domain army's commander, come out and speak. We are the descendants of Shaolin. If you know what's good for you, leave immediately. Otherwise, when the patriarch arrives, none of you will live." Chapter 1395. From Xiao Zun's tone, Shaolin seemed to be an incredible person. However, Yi Qinghan didn't know him, nor had he heard of his name. Naturally, Lu Zhantian didn't know him either. He couldn't help but find a captain of the Martial Extreme Army and ask curiously, "Who is this Shaolin?" The captain of the Martial Extreme Army had been guarding the border all year round. It was impossible for him not to know the top figures of the true martial domain. After thinking for a moment, he immediately replied, "Sir, this Shaolin is a legendary expert. His cultivation has reached the limit of the supreme realm. He is the prime minister of the true martial dynasty. He once guarded the border and led troops to war. He definitely won't lose to the 10 great generals of the ultimate martial domain." Yi Qinghan was immediately happy. This relationship was good. If they destroyed Shaolin City, wouldn't Shaolin take revenge on the ultimate martial domain? Lu Zhantian and Yi Qinghan looked at each other and waved their hands. "Attack the city. The first person to break the city will be rewarded with a supreme divine technique and a copy of the experience." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. When the army heard this, they first shot out tens of thousands of arrows. They covered the sky and the earth, suppressing the direct descendants of the Shao family on the city walls. Boom boom boom. Tens of thousands of arrows broke through the expert's defenses. More than 10 arrows pierced through the body of an expert, suppressing his vitality and soul. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers joined forces to attack a city without an army. Xiao Zun, a supreme god, was blasted off the city walls. He fell to the ground with several arrows stuck in his body. His expression was hideous. Screams echoed in the city. Blood flowed like a river. Some arrows pierced through more than 10 people's bodies and destroyed buildings. Boom. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The army destroyed Shaolin City's resistance. Thousands of soldiers rammed into the city gates and directly smashed them open. Leave the strongest. Kill all the giant gods. As for the rest, cripple and humiliate them. Hang them on the city walls, Yi Qinghan ordered. Why not kill them all? Won't Shaolin be angrier? Lu Zhantian asked curiously. Yi Qinghan shrugged and smiled coldly. Keep them alive to deliver a message. With that, Yi Qinghan led his army into the city and ordered them to slaughter any experts they saw. He stepped on Xiao Zun's body and laughed wickedly. "I gave you face, but you didn't take it. I was only planning to go to Snow Country and the God Realm to slaughter some people. I didn't expect you to deliver your face to me. Did you think that Shaolin's name would protect your Shao family? How laughable. We don't even put the Zhenwu dynasty in our eyes. Otherwise, why would we need to borrow this path? You bunch of thieves." Xiao Zun was furious as he watched the army slaughter. He was just about to curse when Yi Qinghan kicked him so hard that he almost choked. Bang! Yi Qinghan kicked him in the chest and said coldly, "You brought this on yourselves. Tell Shaolin and the Zhenwu dynasty to mind their own business. Otherwise, I'll lead my army into your imperial city next time." With that, Yi Qinghan sealed Xiao Zun's cultivation and hung him on the city walls for the army to humiliate. He had to watch the army slaughter people and even humiliate women. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. This was the army's final glory. There was no harm in letting them enjoy it a little. It could be considered a consolation. When the army saw that Yi Qinghan didn't resist, they immediately burned, killed, and looted the city. They would do anything. This was the hatred and discrimination between realms. They didn't treat people from other realms as humans at all, just like the Great Wasteland domain in the past. It wasn't that Yi Qinghan was ruthless. He just wanted to anger the Zhenwu domain and Shaolin. Only when the Zhenwu domain participated in the battle could he achieve his goal. Soon, the army rushed to the ancestral land of the Shao family and started a massacre. Most of the giant gods were killed, and the others were either killed or injured. Xiao Lincheng was heavily injured. Yi Qinghan felt that it was about time. He led the army directly to the border of the Zhenwu domain through the space gate. The border army didn't expect an army from another realm to appear behind them. They were caught off guard. Yi Qinghan's army broke through their defenses with lightning speed. Tens of thousands of soldiers died on the spot. After killing the people of the Zhenwu domain, the army left and went straight to the Snow Country's divine world. The border of the Snow Country's divine world was controlled by the Snow Fire Emperor. The Snow Nine Emperor was suppressed and couldn't control the army. In order to obtain the pseudo-world weapon, the Snow Fire Emperor gathered most of his troops near the border city and sealed the passage to the ultimate martial world. Unless Yi Qinghan went to the passage and begged for mercy and offered the pseudo-world weapon, he couldn't open the passage. There weren't many guards at the border of the Zhenwu domain. Yi Qinghan forced his way into the Snow Country's divine world and swept through all the checkpoints. He went straight to the border city and wanted to break the seal of the border city and let the Snow Country's army that was trapped in the ultimate martial world retreat. The army of 500,000 quietly appeared in the border city. The border city was already broken and didn't have much defense. Now that it was attacked, a hole was opened on the spot. The army of 500,000 were death warriors. They didn't show any mercy. In addition, Yi Qinghan secretly transmitted his voice to some of the commanders of the Snow Country's army, telling them to move aside. At least half of the Snow Country's army were his own people. Naturally, they would listen to him. Not only did the people of the Left Marshal's mansion not stop the army, they even interfered with the army loyal to the Snow Fire Emperor. They interfered with each other, making Yi Qinghan and Lu Zhantian's army even more ferocious. The Snow Fire Emperor was furious. He roared, "Block them for me. You bunch of trash, how did you train your troops?" Looking at the chaos of the Snow Country's army, the Snow Fire Emperor was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The nearly 10 million new troops that Zhigu ordered people to recruit were completely dumbfounded. They didn't know what to do. However, they seemed to want the seal to be broken so that they could rush over to save Zhigu and the people of the Left Marshal's mansion. Therefore, they were all waiting for the result. The border city was in complete chaos. The army loyal to the Left Marshal's mansion was causing trouble. The people loyal to the Snow Fire Emperor wanted to attack, but they couldn't find a place to attack. The advantageous terrain was occupied by the people of the Left Marshal's mansion. However, they didn't attack. On the other hand, Yi Qinghan and Lu Zhantian led their army of 250,000 to attack. Damn it! A bunch of trash. The Snow Fire Emperor coldly looked at the chaotic army. He pulled out his sword and smashed it into the slave army behind Yi Qinghan. In a split second, he caused a lot of casualties. Yi Qinghan hid his original appearance. His bracelet turned into a heavy sword. He madly pounced at the Snow Fire Emperor. Every sword strike was as heavy as 1,000,000 jin. The Snow Fire Emperor's cultivation was strong, but his body was much weaker. After being attacked by Yi Qinghan, his blood and qi were surging. He didn't have much vitality left. After going all out, he seemed to have aged a few hundred years. Boom! With the cooperation of the Snow Country's army controlled by the Left Marshal's mansion, the seal on the border was broken. However, the army was surrounded by the Snow Country's army. The battle was very fierce. The 200,000 slave army suffered heavy casualties. The remaining 300,000 ordinary soldiers suffered heavy casualties. In the realm of True Force, Shaolin learned that Shaolin City had been attacked by the people of the realm of True Force and suffered heavy casualties. His direct descendants had almost been wiped out. Xiao Zun repeated Yi Qinghan's words to him. Shaolin vomited blood on the spot and asked the Emperor of the realm of True Force to allow him to personally lead troops to the realm of True Force to take revenge. Chapter 1396. In the true martial domain, Shaolin personally led the million-strong army to break through the defense of the Snow Country's divine domain. He rushed from the back of the Snow Country's divine domain's army, but when he reached the back of the border city, he was dumbfounded. The million-strong army looked at the 300,000 to 400,000 strong army rampaging inside the Snow Country's army. The Snow Country's army was in chaos, as if there was no commander controlling it. The 400,000 strong army was like an army of wolves and tigers, invincible. Yi Qinghan discovered the ultimate martial domain's army at the back, and immediately notified the people of the left martial residence to attack his own army. Retreat. Lu Zhantian saw the situation and prepared to lead the army to escape and leave the battlefield. Boom! Yi Qinghan, as the vanguard general, rushed forward and broke through the defense of the Snow Country's divine domain from the left wing of Shaolin's army. Shaolin was stunned for a while, then he roared, "Chase! Capture him alive!" At this moment, the Snow Flame Emperor was furious. He organized the backbone of the imperial family, a total of 800,000, and chased from the back. The three armies galloped, dust flew everywhere, their momentum was like a rainbow. The cities they passed were all closed, no one opened their doors, the border area was in chaos. Advance to the right wing. Break through the Snow Country's border army and enter the ultimate martial domain. Lu Zhantian pointed to the right wing with his spear and ran. Now that he was sure that the true martial domain and the divine domain would blame this on the ultimate martial domain, as long as he could delay for half a month, the ultimate martial domain's army would completely surround the ultimate martial domain, and it would be a success. From now on, no one is allowed to reveal their identity. If you die in battle, I will avenge you in the future, and your descendants will get the credit. If anyone dares to talk nonsense and be a traitor, I will personally kill you. 9 generations will be implicated. Yi Qinghan roared in a low voice. His voice spread within the army, but it didn't spread to the outside. The army trembled. They knew that this was a disaster, but they believed that the left marshal, even if he died in battle, he wouldn't mistreat his family and descendants. The martial extreme army of the ultimate martial realm had been sealed by Yi Qinghan. Before they came, they knew that they were doomed. However, Yi Qinghan had already promised that their identities had been recorded. In the future, when they attacked the ultimate martial realm, their families would enjoy the treatment of the families of martyrs. Bestow upon the giant god a set of ultimate secret techniques and a certain amount of resources. Since they were going to die anyway, the captives of the Wuji army, Dragon God army, and Heavenly Martial army didn't think too much about it. They could only grit their teeth and endure. The army of 400,000 fled madly. Once they were left behind and were caught by Shaolinjun or the Snow Realm army, they would immediately self-detonate their bodies and souls, causing great losses to the two armies. Yi Qinghan and Lu Zhantian led the army in a circle, but their ultimate goal was still to get closer to the border of the ultimate martial realm, hoping to break through the defense and rush over. At this time, the two armies were even more convinced that this group was from the ultimate martial realm. They were extremely angry and chased after them relentlessly. Day after day passed. After a total of 8 days and 8 nights, the army of 400,000 was left with less than 150,000. The rest either died in battle or self-detonated. None of them chose to be a traitor. Although Yi Qinghan felt guilty, he was still firm in his belief that this time, he had to complete his goal. Snow Flame Emperor and Shaolin were also shocked. They didn't expect this ultimate martial realm army to be so terrifying. They would rather die than be captured. This kind of army was definitely the trump card of the trump card. They didn't understand why the ultimate martial realm would choose this kind of army as a suicide squad, taking a detour around the true martial realm and attacking the Snow Empire's divine realm. In the ultimate martial realm, millions of troops attacked the Snow Realm army from the Tongtian Gorge and the Central Continent at the same time. The battle was tragic. If it wasn't for Zhigu and Zhu Wuxin personally guarding the two sides, they would have already been broken through. However, they still suffered heavy losses. In just 8 days, more than a third of the army died and another third of the army was injured. Hold on for 2 more days, retreat to the extreme Dao city. Zhigu and Zhu Wuxin discussed for a moment and decided that this kind of battle was completely unbalanced. The gap was too big. Whether it was the number of people or the resources, they were not enough. If they continued to hold on, Yi Qinghan wouldn't be able to attract the reinforcements of the Two Realms army. There were less than 1,200,000 ordinary Snow Realm army left. They were all recruits recruited by Zhigu. However, all of them were now a regular army with a dense murderous aura. Moreover, their aura was stronger than the ordinary army. They had the determination to die. Even if they were tired, even if they were still bleeding, they were still unwilling to give up. Their eyes were incomparably resolute. In the Tongtian Gorge, relying on Tian Zhan, Zhu Wuxin led 30 personal guards and 300,000 ordinary recruits. Although the number was small, their losses were the least. This was because the 4 great pseudo-world weapons in the middle of the Tongtian Gorge were equivalent to an army of 1 million. Moreover, there were so many people from the crazy sect at the front line. Blood flowed like a river and bones were everywhere. It was incomparably tragic. Both Zhu Wuxin and Zhigu hated Emperor Shui Yan bitterly. Now that the army wasn't left behind, they simply didn't know that the passage to the World River had been opened. Only a few 100,000 Snow Realm army and 10 million ordinary recruits were guarding the border of the World River. Otherwise, they would have definitely chosen to retreat. At the border, there were still some trusted subordinates of Emperor Shui Yan guarding it. Although they couldn't completely seal it off, it was enough to block Xi Ji's group. Once they were attacked from the front and the back, they would die even more miserably. Zhigu didn't retreat and thus avoided a calamity. On the 10th day, the original army of 500,000 was reduced to less than 50,000. Moreover, most of them were injured and their eyes were lifeless. However, they were getting further and further away from the border. They couldn't help but feel despair. There were less than 10,000 captives and 40,000 new recruits left. At this moment, they ran into a mountain and engaged in guerrilla warfare with Shaolinjun and the Snow Realm army, hoping to delay a bit more time. At night, the army of less than 50,000 gathered together. At this moment, they seemed to have thought things through. They surrounded Yi Qinghan with faint smiles in their eyes. "Mister, to be able to fight such a battle with you, I am willing to die." A supreme god expert looked at Yi Qinghan with gratification and pride on his face. "Us too." The army nodded in agreement. They had created many miracles along the way. If it wasn't for Yi Qinghan leading the army, how could these 50,000 soldiers have survived until now? However, they didn't know that their lives were being used as cannon fodder by Yi Qinghan. The corner of Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. He clenched his fist and smiled very miserably. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have absolute strength, why would he use 500,000 soldiers as bait and cannon fodder? Brothers, I am sorry for all of you. However, I will definitely not let down your families. As long as I don't die, all of your names will be remembered in my heart. Yi Qinghan gazed all around. Looking at the pairs of eyes filled with expectation and reverence, he said in a low voice, "Now that you've said those words, we're willing to die." The overgod spoke once more. "We are willing to be loyal to Mr. to the death." The army roared in a low voice. At this moment, the attitude of the less than 10,000 captives changed. They were no longer passively loyal. Instead, they were moved. Yi Qinghan didn't discriminate against them along the way. This was something that others could never do. "Tonight, we can fight to the death. I will take as many as I can with me. I won't leave a single one as a captive." Yi Qinghan stood up and looked at the stars. Calculating the time, he estimated that Zhigu and the others wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Chapter 1397. The two armies searched the mountain and surrounded the area tightly. Yi Qinghan and his 50,000 men had nowhere to go and had become death-sworn. Emperor Shui Yan hated the death warriors to the core. He and Shaolin had the same goal. They wanted to capture the death warriors alive and torture them. Shaolin's goal was to find the real culprit. He wanted to know the name of the death warriors so that he could take revenge on their commander. On a small mountain peak, the 50,000 army crouched and aimed their crossbows at Shaolin's army. Once they were in range, they would kill them all. Killing one was enough. Killing two was a profit. Yi Qinghan also turned berserk into a bow and aimed at Shaolin in the distance. His lips curled into an evil smile. Lu Zhantian looked at the direction Yi Qinghan was aiming at Shaolin and asked in a low voice, "If we kill him, it will affect our plan, right?" "We won't kill him. I'm counting on him to lead the army and help us defeat the ultimate martial realm's army." Yi Qinghan sneered. "I just want to anger him." Lu Zhantian nodded and said no more. Whoosh 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 that the two armies below shot arrows at the same time. They rained down on the mountain peak. Puchin that the arrow rain pierced through the army's body, but no one screamed and exposed their position. Yi Qinghan helped the group hide their auras. They only groaned and fell to the ground. Some people had better cover. Their stones were pierced, but they were not injured. After the arrow rain swept through, at least half of them died. Only 20,000 people were left. Everyone's eyes were filled with hatred. They stared at the army below, waiting for them to lower their guard and approach the mountain peak. The two armies quickly approached the mountain peak. Halfway up the mountain, less than 100 meters away, the shrubs could no longer hide their bodies. Whoosh Yi Qinghan took the lead and shot through more than 10 ancient trees. He instantly rushed to Shaolin's body. Boom! Shaolin was caught off guard and was blasted to the foot of the mountain. If it were not for the fact that his armor was of a higher grade, the arrow would have pierced through his shoulder blade. This arrow signaled the start of the final battle. The divine power of the 20,000 soldiers poured out, and each arrow could penetrate a giant god's body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Arrows rained down, instantly killing countless people. Yi Qinghan turned around and aimed at Emperor Shui Yan. This arrow contained 80% of his strength because he did not want to injure Emperor Shui Yan at all. He wanted to kill him directly. Boom! Whoosh! The arrow left a trail of flames behind it. Everything in its path was reduced to nothingness. Even the mountain rocks were burned to dust. Boom! Bang! The crossbow bolts pierced through the bodies of more than 10 Snow Realm soldiers and collided with the Snow Flame Emperor's divine sword. The aftershock of the collision killed several hundred giant gods. Puff! Emperor Shui Yan didn't expect there to be such a powerful being in this group of men of sacrifice. His explosive power was instantly destroyed, and his qi and blood were in turmoil. He spat out a mouthful of essence blood, and his body was sent flying hundreds of meters away, crashing into the foot of the mountain. Kill! Great Commander Tianwu will avenge us! Yi Qinghan shouted loudly. He led the army and charged into the enemy group, heading straight for the Snow Realm soldiers. The men of sacrifice dived down from above. With Yi Qinghan's charge, it was like a sharp knife stabbing into the enemy's heart. They were invincible. After a few charges, they actually reached the foot of the mountain. However, there were more than 10,000 soldiers at the foot of the mountain, and it was very difficult to charge out. Lu Zhantian turned into a meteor and led the 10,000 soldiers to charge at the weakest place. He hoped that he could take away a portion of the soldiers, but he was disappointed. Because there were too many captains in the Snow Realm army, and they were all die-hard experts of the imperial family. After a few charges, less than 2,000 of the 10,000 remained, and he himself was heavily injured. Boom! Shui Yan Emperor personally charged at Lu Zhantian with his sword. He could see that Lu Zhantian was the commander of the army, and he hoped to capture him alive. He killed more than 10 men of sacrifice with a single sword strike. When he reached Lu Zhantian's side, he broke the spear in Lu Zhantian's hand with lightning speed and pierced his chest with his sword. Yi Qinghan was shocked. He turned around and attacked Shui Yan Emperor, hoping to save Lu Zhantian. Boom! Shui Yan Emperor sent Lu Zhantian flying with a single sword strike and threw him into the Snow Realm army. He roared, "Capture him alive!" Soon after, the army took away the unconscious Lu Zhantian and quickly retreated from the battlefield. The rest of the army surrounded Yi Qinghan. Soon after, Shaolinjun rushed to the top of the mountain and dived down. He surrounded Yi Qinghan and the 10,000 men of sacrifice from the rear. "Vice Commander, leave quickly. We will cover you." No one was willing to expose Yi Qinghan's identity. Otherwise, they would lose the lives of 500,000 soldiers for nothing. They all called him Vice Commander. Boom! A man of sacrifice self-detonated. The aftermath of the explosion flattened the nearby mountain rocks and ancient trees. Boom boom boom. Soon after, more than 10 men of sacrifice self-detonated. They killed hundreds of soldiers of the Snow Realm Army, including Xiao Linjun. Vice Commander, I am willing to do this. Please complete this mission. Boom. The only remaining Supreme God expert chose to self-detonate. His aura soared into the starry river, and flames soared into the sky. The range of the explosion reached hundreds of miles away. Everything within 100 miles was engulfed in flames. The energy was restless. Boom boom boom. One by one, the men of sacrifice self-detonated. Like firecrackers, they exploded in all directions. No one dared to get close to the battlefield. Yi Qinghan's heart ached. It was a pity to bring such a group of men of sacrifice here to complete the mission. However, for the sake of the millions of soldiers in Extreme Dao City, it was worth it to die. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan turned into a stream of light and disappeared in the flames of the self-detonation. They had suffered heavy losses in this battle. Even Lu Zhantian was lost. Less than half an incense stick's time after Yi Qinghan left, Lu Zhantian woke up. He looked up to the sky and roared, I am willing to go with the wind. Avenge me. Take care of my wife. Boom! A firework exploded in the sky. Lu Zhantian had chosen to die. He wanted to glorify the world in the most glorious manner. Yi Qinghan fell from the distance. He turned around and looked at the firework. His eyes were absent-minded. The flames in his eyes had almost condensed into a solid substance. This was the first brother of the Kuang sect to die in battle since entering the Seven Realms. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath. He thought of Lu Zhantian. For love, for Shao Qi, for his own army. He was a hero that few people could compare to. Who would have thought that he would die here today? I will avenge you. Yi Qinghan roared. He turned around and fled towards the border. Xiao Lin was not willing to let Yi Qinghan leave. He led the army in the direction where Yi Qinghan left. Emperor Shui Yan hated Yi Qinghan to the bone. He immediately ordered the army to seal the border. Yi Qinghan sneered. He disappeared without a trace in a few flashes. After losing sight of Yi Qinghan, Emperor Shui Yan looked at the messy border of Snow Country and roared, Gather all the troops at the border. Attack the ultimate martial realm. Xiao Lin wanted to take revenge. Naturally, he wanted to attack the ultimate martial realm. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. He quickly joined forces with Emperor Shui Yan. They broke through the border and rushed into the ultimate martial realm. Chapter 1398. Ultimate Martial World. The army surrounded Extreme Dao City. Ji Guanju Wuxin left behind a large number of corpses and had no choice but to retreat to Extreme Dao City and defend the city with their will of death. The barrier shone for 1,000 li as countless armies attacked from the outside. Divine power poured down and the barrier was in danger of collapsing at any time. For experts with pseudo-world weapons stood around Extreme Dao City. They used their world power to reinforce the barrier, turning it into an unbreakable defense. The Guangzhong was divided into 3 groups, supporting Gu Qingyu, Shige, and Jiang Jingtian respectively. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, had the help of the 3 strongest fighters from Hell. As long as the 4 sides did not fall, the defense of the city would not fall. The 4 world powers formed a cycle and became the pillar of the world. It would never collapse. More than 1 million soldiers surged with divine power as they rushed towards the barrier to reinforce it. The people in Extreme Dao City did not know whether to help Ultimate Martial World or Extreme Dao City's army. They were the people of Ultimate Martial World, but now they were being protected by the people of Extreme Dao City. After the Snow Realm army occupied Extreme Dao City, they did not massacre them. In fact, they were even treated better than before. Most of the ordinary people did not care about who was in power, they only cared about whether their lives were guaranteed. Clearly, the lives of the people in Extreme Dao City were very stable. They did not need to worry about being bullied by the playboys or being exploited by the state government. They were vaguely looking forward to the victory of the Snow Realm army. Shua, a giant god, walked out of his family. He used his will and divine power to pour his entire life's cultivation into the barrier just to reinforce it with a trace of divine power, hoping that the barrier would be even more stable. Boom. Another expert walked out of his family. One after another, hundreds of giant gods appeared on the originally empty street. War was related to everyone. No one could escape. Once the city was breached, the ultimate martial world's army would think that the people here had betrayed their world and would slaughter them all. Another expert appeared on the street. He had white hair and had the demeanor of a transcendent being. His supreme divine power surged and he was awe-inspiring. His eyes were focused and flickering with light. Supreme divine power poured into the barrier, causing the barrier to shine like a huge jewel that made people drool. Boom boom boom. Ding. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Wuji army, the heavenly martial army, and the dragon god army unleashed a barrage of arrows, forcefully attacking the barrier. They hoped to break the barrier as soon as possible. As long as the barrier was broken, the 1 million soldiers inside would be like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Yi Qinghan appeared in the ultimate martial realm and looked at the barrier. He pulled out the divine bird and asked seriously, "Is there any way for me to enter the extreme martial city without alerting anyone or destroying the barrier? Do you really think I'm a divine bird? With so many armies attacking outside, even if I can pass through the barrier and bring you through, what about those attacks? How can you do it without making a sound?" The divine bird rolled its eyes and mocked. "From underground. I will be responsible for going to the underground of Extreme Dao City, and you will be responsible for sending me into the city." Yi Qinghan immediately said. The divine bird hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "I'll do my best. Who knows if there are any special arrangements under the city?" Yi Qinghan mobilized the earth elements and quickly disappeared. The earth elements were like air, helping Yi Qinghan. Xiao xiao xiao. Yi Qinghan shuttled through the underground like a pangolin. The earth and rocks didn't have the slightest effect on him, and he quickly approached the bottom of Extreme Dao City. The bottom of the city was filled with steel, and it was hundreds of meters thick. It was very difficult to break through from underground, otherwise, the army would have already dug through the city walls. Yi Qinghan released his divine sense and looked for some special gaps. Every city had them, but they were very narrow and not suitable for the army to escape or attack. These gaps were used by some experts to escape. Not long later, Yi Qinghan found the escape tunnel and rushed to less than 1 meter below Extreme Dao City with the divine bird. However, the barrier formed a huge sphere, and even the underground was blocked. This was the fluctuation of the world's power. If Yi Qinghan forced his way in, the defense outside would become extremely weak in an instant, and the army outside would be able to break through easily. He still had to rely on the divine bird, which could ignore the barrier. The divine bird shuttled through the barrier, stretched out its little claw, and said in a low voice, "Fuse with my mind. I don't know if I can bring you in, but let's give it a try." Yi Qinghan held the divine bird's claw, and his soul fused with the divine bird, as if they had become one. Shua. Yi Qinghan actually entered the city without any resistance. "Ha! This divine bird is indeed invincible," the divine bird said arrogantly. Yi Qinghan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and in a flash he arrived on top of the city wall. Ji Gunju Wuxin's faces were solemn, and they didn't notice that Yi Qinghan had already arrived behind them. The plan succeeded. "Just hold on a little longer, and there will be reinforcements coming," Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. Ji Gunju Wuxin were shocked, and they turned to look at Yi Qinghan with a face full of surprise. However, when they saw the murderous intent on Yi Qinghan's face, they knew that there was a problem with the plan. "Brothers, what happened?" Ji Gu asked in astonishment. Yi Qinghan clenched his fists, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He stared at the army in front of him and coldly said, "The suicide squad was completely wiped out, and my brother Lu Zhantian is also dead. Today I will make them pay the price." Zhu Wuxin clearly knew about Lu Zhantian, and when he heard that he had fallen, he was somewhat surprised, and his mood was somewhat low. "Mister, please restrain your grief," Zhu Wuxin said in a low voice. The cold wind blew his black hair, and Yi Qinghan's heart was in turmoil. He didn't know how to explain this to Lu Zhantian's wife, Mu Xiaoqi. At this time, Countless armies rushed out from the border. There were at least 3 million Snow World Army soldiers and 5 million ordinary recruits. Shaolin was filled with anger, and without even asking, he led the charge towards the Tianwu army. Boom! The Tianwu army, Dragon army, and Wuji army were surrounded. Arrows rained down, and under the close-range attacks, even the defensive barrier couldn't be opened in time. The tens of millions of soldiers were in chaos, and they were all fighting. Gotcha! Yi Qinghan clenched his fists, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. His eyes emitted a cold light. Supreme Tianwu, Long Ziyue, and the others were stupefied. They didn't understand why the Snow World army suddenly appeared. Even Shaolinjun appeared, and their numbers instantly surpassed theirs. The encirclement was turned into an encirclement, and the advantage became a disadvantage. Turn around. Activate the heaven-destroying bow. Defend. Defend. Long Ziyue personally led the dragon army to attack the enemy, hoping to tear an opening. However, he was indeed the commander of the charge. The dragon army's aura was like a rainbow, and they forcefully tore apart the ordinary army. The army circled around and crushed all the experts in the surroundings. Boom! The army destroyed heaven and earth, and dust flew everywhere. There were countless casualties, and every breath would take away thousands of lives. When the supreme gods were surrounded by thousands of soldiers, they were pale and powerless. Although the supreme gods could instantly destroy hundreds of giant gods, they couldn't escape the attacks of others. As long as one supreme god was ambushed, he would die on the spot. The Wuji army and Tianwu army gave up on attacking Extreme Dao City and began to turn around and attack. They wanted to leave the battlefield, and there wasn't much use in fighting to the death. Chapter 1399. The wind whistled and blood rained down. Giant gods were constantly being smashed into pieces and scattered all over the sky. The sky was dyed red, and the earth was dyed red. Battle robes fluttered in the wind. Prepare for battle. Yi Qinghan shouted. Boom! The army below the city was fighting, but Yi Qinghan didn't have any intention of participating. He didn't want to lose the army that he had spent so much effort to gather. The death squad from before had moved him. Some people shouldn't be used as cannon fodder, just like these people who believed in him. They were death soldiers, and they shouldn't die in vain. Yi Qinghan looked at the army coldly. No matter how many people died, he did not feel any heartache. As long as he could protect the million elites in the city, it was fine. Supreme martial artist Tianwu stopped Shaolin. Seeing how Shaolin was glaring at him with killing intent, as if he wanted to turn him into dust, Supreme martial artist Tianwu couldn't understand. He roared, "Shaolin, do you want to start a war between the two worlds? What does today's matter have to do with you? You still have the face to ask me? It's fine if you sent your army to the true martial domain, but you actually slaughtered my clan and humiliated my Shao family's descendants. Today, you will die without a doubt." Shaolin was furious. He pulled out his sword and charged towards the Sky Martial Saint. When did I send people to the true martial domain? Even if you want to find an excuse, you need to have evidence. You are provoking the ultimate martial domain. The Sky Martial Saint roared. 500,000 death soldiers. From the ultimate martial domain's martial domain river to the true martial domain, you killed countless of my Shaolin city's people, humiliated women, plundered resources, and then went to the Snow Country's divine domain and killed countless Snow World soldiers. Are you still my true martial domain's people or the Snow World soldiers? In the end, they still fantasized that the Sky Martial Army would take revenge for them. Today, I will destroy the Sky Martial Army. None of you will be able to leave alive. Today, the true martial domain and the ultimate martial domain are at war. It is not your turn to declare war. Shaolin waved his hand and ordered the army to charge towards the Sky Martial Saint. Kill a Sky Martial artist and you will be rewarded with 10,000 genes of resources. You will be promoted to governor. Hua! The great army swarmed forward. A large portion of Shaolinjun's army was his direct descendant, and they charged toward the heavenly martial arts supremacy with the hatred of their family. When thousands or even tens of thousands of people poured out their divine power at the same time, the combined attack formed completely surpassed that of a supreme divine power. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the place where Prime Sky Marshal Saint stood was razed to the ground. Prime Sky Marshal Saint escaped, but the tens of guards beside him died miserably on the spot. The Martial Emperor was furious. He retreated to the army and quickly gathered tens of thousands of soldiers to clash with Xiao Linjun. Xiao Lin and Supreme Martial Artist Tian Wu soared into the sky. Divine radiance collided with their surroundings. Whoosh 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 da boom. Waves of chi surged, and no one dared to get involved. Only the two of them fought with all their might, and occasionally, blood would splash through the air. Standing on the city wall of Extreme Dao City, Yi Qinghan looked on coldly. He was emotionless as he watched tens of millions of people fighting, just like an ice-cold demon king. The army in the Extreme Martial City was incomparably excited. Their blood was boiling, and they couldn't wait to rush in and kill the Extreme Martial World's army. Yi Qinghan had no intention of getting involved. It would be best if the leaders of the three armies in front of him died here, especially the Snow Flame Emperor. If he died, the Snow Nation's divine world would once again return to his control. If he didn't die, he would continue to pester him and take the pseudo-world artifact. The Extreme Martial World's army, led by Sun Yang, was the first to break through the defenses of the Snow Nation's army. Together with the Dragon God army, they finally opened a path to the heavens. However, the Heaven Martial World's army was entangled by Xiao Linjun. They were not allowed to leave. Today, they had to annihilate the Heaven Martial World's army to vent their hatred. Prime Sky Martial World was enraged. He forced Xiao Lin back with a sword and roared, "My entire army is here. When did I send 500,000 death warriors to attack the true martial world's Xiao Linqing? Xiao Lin, you have to take responsibility for your actions. I can't be bothered to talk to you. Wait until I take your head and offer it to Xiao Linqing, then I'll tell you everything." Xiao Lin was furious. How could he listen to his explanation? He just wanted to get rid of the Heaven Martial World's army as soon as possible to get his revenge. Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Xiao Lin once more ordered his army to charge at the Heaven Martial World's army. The Snow Flame Emperor also led his army to charge at the Heaven Martial World. The Heaven Martial Army's death warriors had caused incalculable losses to the Snow Nation's divine world, especially in terms of reputation. The Grand Snow Flame Emperor had personally led an army of 10 million to guard the border, but a mere army of 500,000 had broken through their defenses. That was an absolute humiliation. This enmity had to be avenged. Only by destroying the Heaven Martial World's army could they establish their might. So the ordinary army was only responsible for blocking the Dragon God army and the Extreme Martial World's army, allowing the Snow Flame Emperor and Xiao Lin to deal with the Heaven Martial World's army. The pressure on the Heaven Martial World's army suddenly increased. 1 million people were fighting against the elites of 2 divine dynasties. The difference in numbers was more than 3 times. In just a short while, they had lost nearly 100,000 soldiers. The Dragon God army and the Extreme Martial World's army once more returned to the battlefield under Long Ziyue and Sun Yang's command. They wanted to bring back the Heaven Martial World's army so that they could retreat to the Heaven Connecting Gorge. The army was having a hard time. The front line was stretched too far, and the enemy quickly broke through. Xiao Linqing's army was immediately pincered. His army of 900,000 was instantly reduced to only 800,000. New grudges and old grudges caused their armies to descend into a frenzied state. The meat grinder of war was brought out to its fullest. War was cruel and anyone could die. Just the shockwaves from the battle would kill a few experts. The Snow Flame Emperor glanced at the Extreme Dao City's army. Seeing that they weren't doing anything, he was furious. "What are you waiting for? Why aren't you attacking?" Yi Qinghan coldly snorted and waved his hand, indicating for his army to calm down. Ji Gu hesitated for a moment. This was the best time to wipe out the Heaven Martial World's army. He didn't understand why Yi Qinghan wasn't attacking, so he asked, "When are we attacking?" "There's no rush. It's fine if we win this battle, But if we lose everything, we won't be in control anymore, Yi Qinghan calmly said. Then, Ji Gu frowned. He still didn't understand when Yi Qinghan was going to attack. Wait for the Snow Flame Emperor to die or be heavily injured, Yi Qinghan coldly said. Ji Ji's mouth twitched. He didn't expect Yi Qinghan to be so ruthless. Although he didn't give the Snow Flame Emperor any face, he didn't want him to be heavily injured or killed. The three armies of the extreme martial world exploded and scattered the army, leaving behind a large number of corpses and broken limbs. They finally broke through the encirclement of the two armies, but they suffered heavy losses. The three commanders were all injured, and their battle robes were tattered. The Snow Flame Emperor was gasping for breath. He had lost a lot of his life force and his face was pale. Not only was he unable to take revenge, he had lost half of his elite army. Xiao Lin had also suffered heavy losses. He had brought out 1 million elites from the true martial world, but he had lost more than 200,000 in 2 battles. At this moment, his face was green with anger. Right at this moment, Yi Qinghan waved his hand, and a giant bow appeared. It was about the same size as the extreme martial world's heaven-exterminating giant bow. His body transformed into a giant body, and his veins bulged. His divine power poured out and formed a long sharp arrow, aiming at the sky martial world's supreme martial world. Hiss hiss hiss. The space was cut apart by the bowstring, and black holes appeared continuously. It was a shocking sight. Whoosh! The sharp arrow pierced through the void, dragging a huge flame behind it. It shuttled through the air above Shaolinjun and killed its way to the center of the Heaven Martial World's army, heading straight for the Supreme Martial World's Supreme Martial World. Chapter 1400. Boom! The huge arrow pierced through the void and exploded beside Prime Tianwu. Divine power surged and instantly destroyed hundreds of experts. Bang! The sharp arrow was like a hot knife through butter. It directly sent Prime Tianwu flying. A special power of the world pierced through Prime Tianwu's defense and shattered his armor. It almost destroyed his life force. His body was like a kite with a broken string as it smashed through the army and fell 1,000 meters away. The Tianwu army was affected and at least hundreds of people died. Prime Tianwu fainted on the spot. Yi Qinghan put away the huge bow and stopped attacking. He coldly looked at the army below the city and finally fixed his gaze on Emperor Shui Yan. Emperor Shui Yan also gasped. He did not expect the huge bow to be so powerful. It could injure Prime Tianwu from a distance. His eyes were filled with greed. However, he did not know that this was Yi Qinghan's life weapon. It also had the Great Desolation Divine Bead as its weapon spirit. It could be used with the power of the world in his body and his comprehension of the power of the world. Even if he had the Berserk Gravity Bow, he would not be able to play any tricks. Xiao Lin had forgotten about his revenge. He stared at Yi Qinghan with suspicion. However, he did not know what he was thinking. Even he did not know. Long Ziyue and Sun Yang quickly brought Prime Tianwu back to the Sky Connecting Gorge and sent out a signal for help. Below Extreme Dao City, close to 10 million people were staring at each other. No one spoke. The ordinary army was stunned by Yi Qinghan's arrow. Xiao Lin and Emperor Shui Yan's eyes were filled with greed. They wanted to steal such a treasure. It was comparable to a pseudo-world weapon. Yi Qinghan looked down at Emperor Shui Yan. Emperor Shui Yan's old face was filled with anger. It was as if Yi Qinghan owed him something. Zuofeng, how dare you go against my will? Do you still have any respect for the royal family? Emperor Shui Yan asked angrily. Yi Qinghan couldn't help laughing out of anger. He asked back, what a great identity you have. You actually want to take the pseudo-world weapon in the middle of the war between the two realms. If you don't succeed, you will seal the border and cooperate with the enemy to kill our soldiers who are charging at the front lines. You have caused our Snow Realm army to suffer more than 1 million casualties for no reason. You still have the face to say that you are a member of the imperial family. On behalf of all the soldiers, I ask you, what position do you place us in? As a member of the imperial family, do you treat us soldiers who have risked our lives for the Snow Empire as trash, and abandon us just like that? Do you represent the royal family or yourself? Shui Yan Emperor was speechless after being questioned. He simply couldn't imagine that a commander of the Snow World Army would dare to verbally attack a great elder of the imperial family in public. Emperor Shui Yan's face turned red as he roared, "You're slandering me! Attacking and blaspheming the royal family is simply lawless." "I'm slandering you? Mr. Jigu is Mr. Ling Yan's disciple. There should be people who believe his words," Yi Qinghan said coldly. At this moment, Jigu walked forward and stared at Emperor Shui Yan. He said firmly, "Emperor Shui Yan, this time you caused our Snow World Army to suffer more than 1,000,000 casualties for no reason. Cooperating with the ultimate martial realm army to seal the border, you want to bury these millions of soldiers here. I will personally ask for an explanation from the Imperial Family Elder Council. I will sue you for treason. Even if the Realm Lord is alarmed, I will make sure that the dead soldiers have an explanation." Emperor Shui Yan's body trembled. His spine felt some pain as cold sweat dripped down. However, Emperor Shui Yan was an old fox. How could he be intimidated by two juniors? He said coldly, "Zhuofeng, this emperor asked you for the pseudo-world weapon for the glory of the Snow Empire and the God Realm. However, you refused without hesitation. You clearly don't put the divine nation in your eyes. This emperor had no choice but to ask you to hand over the pseudo-world weapon. Naturally, I won't let the army die in battle. Jigu doesn't understand the situation, but you do. If you dare to blaspheme the imperial family again, this emperor will kill you today." "Ha! Ha!" Yi Qinghan laughed wildly. Everyone was shocked as they didn't know what he was laughing about. "Who do you think you are? Why are you asking me for the pseudo-world weapon? My pseudo-world weapon was exchanged with my life. Do you think you can take it just because you want it? Isn't that too funny? Or have you gone senile? You want to use the pseudo-world weapon to bring glory to the Snow Empire and the God Realm, then what am I doing? The Heavenly Martial Army has already broken through the border cities of the Snow Empire, and we are the ones who led the army to counterattack. Are you trying to ruin the reputation of the Snow Empire and the God Realm? At the crucial moment, you want to take away the pseudo-world weapon and even seal the border. You don't allow reinforcements and resources can't be replenished. I have every reason to suspect that you are secretly in cahoots with the ultimate martial realm. When this matter reaches the Imperial Family Elder Assembly, the truth will be revealed." Yi Qinghan's aura suddenly changed as he said coldly. The majority of the Snow Empire Army's grassroots were on Yi Qinghan's side. This was because Yi Qinghan was speaking for the dead soldiers and did not even hesitate to offend the Imperial Family Elder. However, Emperor Shui Yan was truly betraying the Snow Empire Army. The millions of ordinary soldiers were naturally on Yi Qinghan and Ji Ji's side. They all coldly looked at Emperor Shui Yan with hatred in their eyes. Emperor Shui Yan had no way to back down. He shouted, "Traitor, you are insulting and slandering the Imperial Family Elder. You want a rebel? Take them down. If you dare to resist, kill without mercy. If you dare to stop, you will be sentenced to death as traitors." Yi Qinghan curled his lips and raised a trace of disdain as he coldly looked at the army. However, no one dared to move. Even if Emperor Shui Yan had a few loyal followers, when they wanted to move, they immediately panicked when they saw that the army was not moving. Seeing this, Emperor Shui Yan became even angrier. He angrily looked at the Snow Empire Army and roared, "Could it be that you also want to rebel?" The army still did not move. At this moment, even Shaolin was a bit shocked. He could not imagine the prestige Yi Qinghan had in the Snow Empire Army. Normally, when the Imperial Family Elder came out of seclusion, if they wanted to catch someone, they only needed to stretch out their hand. Even a commander like Zhu Wuxin would not be able to escape. However, no one dared to catch Yi Qinghan. Jigu and Zhu Wuxin coldly looked at the army below. Seeing everyone's performance, they let out a sigh of relief. Emperor Shui Yan colluded with the ultimate martial world and cut off their supplies without permission. He sealed the border and caused millions of Snow Empire Army to die in the ultimate martial world. I, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Snow Empire Army and the Snow Empire Imperial Court Assistant Minister Zhuofeng, hereby issue an arrest warrant." Yi Qinghan coldly said, "Men, Open the city gate and capture Emperor Shui Yan. If he dares to resist, execute him on the spot. If anyone dares to stop, kill them on the spot as traitors. The army sucked in a breath of cold air. The Snow Empire Army's commander had never arrested a grand elder of the imperial family. This was the first time in history. However, the army was not angry. Instead, they were somewhat excited as they looked at Yi Qinghan, Ji Gu and the others who were on top of the extreme Dao city. The city gate opened. Huang Zong and the others led their army and rushed out, heading straight for Emperor Shui Yan. They were really going to capture him, not just to scare him. Emperor Shui Yan's expression greatly changed as he roared, "Are you all rebelling? Destroy this army for me." Chapter 1401. Emperor Shui Yan roared, but the army remained indifferent, especially the new recruits, who took the initiative to make way for Huang Zong and the others. Emperor Shui Yan kept retreating because the people from the insane sect were holding pseudo-world weapons. Boom, boom. The army marched in unison and glared at Emperor Shui Yan. They didn't care if he was an elder of the imperial family or not. This time, they had almost been killed by him and they had lost 1 million of their brothers. Neither Ji Gu nor Heartless objected to Yi Qinghan's treasonous actions. On the contrary, they were very supportive. In order to win over the hearts of the people, this was the best decision they could make. Emperor Shui Yan, if you have a clear conscience, then don't resist. Otherwise, I will take your head as a sacrifice to the nearly 2 million soldiers who died today. Yi Qinghan said coldly. Emperor Shui Yan took a deep breath and looked at the pseudo-world weapons in the hands of Jiang Jingtian, Gu Qingyu, Xiao Yu, and Shirgu. Acting recklessly, Yi Qinghan snorted coldly in his heart. Now, Yi Qinghan still wanted to covet the pseudo-world weapon. He could not help but feel murderous again. Go ahead and be greedy. It would be great if the entire imperial family were as greedy as you. I will lead the Snow World Army and rebel. I will use the name of cleaning the monarch and killing the traitors to completely control the Snow Empire and the Divine Realm. Yi Qinghan muttered to himself. His ambition was ignited and he became even more greedy. He wanted to destroy the royal family of Snow Country and lure out the realm lord of Snow Country's divine world so that he could determine the extent of Shui Wudi's injuries. Snow Country's divine world's heavenly snow god, extreme martial world's hierarch Wu Ji, true martial world's night demon deity king, transcendent world's righteous heaven divine monarch, endless world's Wu Tian sovereign, six beast world's demon venerables, divine martial world's divine martial world's seven supreme world's heavenly snow god, extreme martial world's hierarch Wu Ji. These 7 supreme world lords were not willing to come out. Until now. They must be severely injured, otherwise, they would have come out to enjoy themselves. Yi Qinghan understood the 7 of them. They were all in seclusion now. As long as the God dynasty wasn't destroyed, they wouldn't appear. There was only one possibility: their injuries were worsening, and they might not even have the ability to protect themselves. Even with a realm weapon, they might not be able to win against a peak pseudo-sector lord. If Yi Qinghan couldn't win against a peak pseudo-sector lord, he naturally couldn't win against Yi Qinghan, who had the Great Wastelands tablet. Of course, the prerequisite was that Yi Qinghan could reach the pseudo-sector lord level. If he wanted a draw, he had to reach the pseudo-sector lord level. Emperor Shui Yan's eyes flickered. He wanted to resist, but when he saw the 4 pseudo-world weapons showing their sharpness and killing intent, he gave up and surrendered. Ji Gu, you should be the one to capture him. I don't trust the left commander's residence. Emperor Shui Yan stared at Ji Gu and said. Ji Gu looked at the expressionless Yi Qinghan and did not object. He waved his hand and ordered a group of death soldiers in the city, capture Emperor Shui Yan and guard him strictly. Other than this marshal, no one is allowed to approach him. Shua. The army rushed out of the extreme Dao city. A senior commander restrained Emperor Shui Yan and led a group of 10,000 men to imprison him. Mr. Ji Gu, I'll let you escort Emperor Shui Yan back to the holy city. I'll stay in the extreme Dao city, Yi Qinghan said indifferently. He obviously couldn't return to the holy city now. Otherwise, the group of royal elders would definitely seize the pseudo-world weapon. Zhige could see that Yi Qinghan had some misgivings, so he didn't object. At least he had Ling Yan behind him. Other than Shui Wudi, no one else in the royal family would dare to do anything to him. All right, I'll leave this place to you. When the matter with Emperor Shui Yan is over, I'll immediately return. Don't worry, from now on, no one will dare to cut off our supplies. Ji Gu said firmly. Yi Qinghan nodded and didn't say anything. Very quickly, Ji Gu led a group of people to escort Emperor Shui Yan back to the Snow Country's divine world, leaving the army standing outside the city, not knowing what to do. Yi Qinghan looked at the army and said, "All troops, set up camp here and rest for a few days. Prepare to counterattack the extreme martial world and take revenge." Sir. The army was neat and uniform, and their momentum was like a rainbow. Xiao Lin looked at the heaven-connecting gorge in front of him, and then at the extreme Dao city behind him. The anger in his eyes was self-evident. The Sky Martial Sovereign hadn't been killed yet, the Sky Martial Army hadn't been destroyed, and the humiliation of the country hadn't been avenged. How could they retreat? Yi Qinghan looked at the change in Xiao Lin's expression and snorted inwardly. "Brother Lu died because of you. I'll bury you and your army here. However, this amount of people isn't enough to mess up the situation. You must be Senior Xiao Lin. I didn't expect you to participate. Aren't you afraid of dragging the true martial world into the realm war?" Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. Xiao Lin's mouth twitched and he roared hoarsely, "The Sky Martial Army and I cannot live under the same sky. The undying Sky Martial Army will never rest." "Ha!" Yi Qinghan laughed and disdainfully said, "Senior Xiao Lin, it's not that I'm looking down on you, but how can you destroy the Sky Martial Army with just a few 100,000 people? You don't even have enough resources. Once you enter the ultimate martial world, your army will probably be wiped out." Xiao Lin's expression was ugly, but he couldn't refute that. "Of course I'd be happy to have more reinforcements. However, the army you're bringing is uncontrollable. It will mess up my plans." Yi Qinghan looked down at Xiao Lin and said coldly, "Senior, if you want revenge, I can help you." However, with this amount of people, it was clear that Yi Qinghan wanted to force Xiao Lin to bring more troops from the true martial world and start an all-out war between the three realms. If the ultimate martial world wanted to win, they would have to rope in people from other realms. In the end, it would affect the entire 7 realms. "I can help you open up the passage between the true martial world and the ultimate martial world so that the true martial world's army can enter. Of course, I also believe that Senior has the ability to do so." Yi Qinghan said indifferently. The border between the true martial world and the ultimate martial world was endless. It wasn't just the martial extreme river that was a dead end. As long as they crossed the extreme Dao mountain range, the other side would be connected. Yi Qinghan stared at the struggling Xiao Lin. He wasn't in a hurry and waited for him to make a decision. Zhu Wuxin quickly mobilized the army to set up camp. He personally led a team to set up defenses in the heaven-connecting gorge. Another team blocked the east side of the extreme Dao city to prevent the ultimate martial world's army from attacking. There were too few virtuous paragons that were suitable to lead troops. Other than Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin, Lu Zhantian had died in battle. There were no other peerless experts that could lead troops. Furthermore, Lu Outyan was overseeing the primal chaos realm. Without a virtuous paragon to lead troops, they could only raise their own. After a while, Xiao Lin finally nodded and said, "Mr. Zhuoshui, if possible, please help me open the passage to the true martial world. I want to mobilize the army and start an all-out war. You and I will work together to destroy the 10 great legions of the ultimate martial world." Good. Senior is truly courageous. Today, I will personally lead people to open the passage and let the true martial world's army enter. Yi Qinghan smiled. There was a faint evil aura in his smile that made people's hair stand on end. After the army was arranged properly, Yi Qinghan personally led 2 million troops and Xiao Lin's army to the west. They crossed the extreme Dao mountain range and headed straight for the westernmost plains. Chapter 1402. The ultimate martial world was split into two regions, east and west, with the extreme Dao mountain range as the boundary. The mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the extreme martial river stopped at the Tier danger ground. It extended for thousands of miles and flowed towards the ocean. Heading towards the northwest, it was the vast and bustling border. Both the true martial world and the ultimate martial world had been peaceful for so many years, and no one cared that the war would affect this place. The 2 million-strong army split into two, heading towards Steel Forest City from the north and south. Steel Forest City was dignified, much more so than the extreme Dao City. It possessed top-notch fighting strength, and its army was close to 1 million strong. However, when they saw the 2,800,000 strong army attacking them from the front and back, they immediately fired a distress arrow. Yi Qinghan transformed into a giant god, and with the giant bow in his hand, the ground was cracked. The giant bow was stretched and the space was cut apart. His aura rushed towards the heavens. Fight! Fight! The army roared, and their aura was like a rainbow. Steel Forest City's barrier was fully activated, but the army on the city wall was shocked and terrified. They felt that the barrier wouldn't be able to block the attack of the giant bow. Boom! 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 Jiang Jingtian held the world-piercing spear in his hand, and Shirgu weighed the stone slab in his hand, revealing an arrogant smile. Veins popped out all over their body, and they were ready to support Yi Qinghan's attack. Huat showed a 10-meter-long arrow as thick as an adult's arm pierced through the clouds and waves, tearing apart the shackles. It roared as it transformed into a giant flaming dragon, and the world's power rushed towards Steel Forest City. Boom! Jiang Jingtian soared into the sky, man and spear as one, and followed the arrow towards Steel Forest City. Boundless heaven and earth, invincible brick. Look at my heaven-covering brick. The stone slab in Shirju's hand suddenly changed endlessly, and it was infinitely enlarged as it fiercely smashed towards the barrier. The three god powers all carried the world's power, and the attack range was all focused on a single point, enough to destroy the heaven and earth. Boom! The arrow was the first to hit the barrier, and it caused the heaven and earth to shake. The soldiers on the city wall felt their heads explode, and as if they had been hit, blood flowed out of their 7 orifices, and they fell back stiffly. Although their bodies didn't die, their souls had been shaken to death. Boom! CSI. The giant arrow spun. The barrier was distorted, as if it was about to be pierced through. The world-piercing spear was about to pierce through the barrier. It came from the side and struck the spot where the giant arrow was attacking. In an instant, the barrier collapsed. The two attacks blasted into the city, causing a mushroom cloud to rise. Boom! Shirgu held the huge brick and fell from the sky. It was as if the sky had collapsed as he smashed into the city wall. Boom! The city wall was smashed by the huge stone bricks, and the city gate was crushed. What followed was a flurry of arrows, covering the sky and covering the earth as they rained down on Steel Forest City. Not a single arrow might not be able to kill a giant god, but dozens of arrows were enough to destroy a giant god. As for a higher deity, a single arrow could pierce through their soul and body. In an instant, they suffered heavy losses. Steel Forest City was unable to put up any effective resistance. The commander of the army was stunned by Yi Qinghan, Jiang Jingtian, and Shirji's attacks. He felt powerless and despaired. He couldn't even muster up the will to fight. A battle of this level was simply a one-sided slaughter. Those who surrender will be spared. Yi Qinghan bellowed. He was like a war god as he stepped onto the collapsed city wall. He held the giant bow in his hand and looked down on everyone. The army rushed into the city. Together with the two vanguards, they were even more destructive than a sharp knife. What followed was Xiaolinjun at the back. Because the city didn't have a defensive barrier, Xiaolinjun's anger was vented. He took the lead and rushed up the city wall. He swept across and forcefully broke open the city gate. He led the army in. He didn't accept captives at all. He only wanted to destroy and plunder. Steel Forest City was flooded with blood. A large number of commoners fled towards the southern city gate. The southern city gate accepted captives, but Xiaolinjun didn't. The southern city gate was filled with people. They were wailing and begging to surrender. Yi Qinghan stood on the city wall and looked towards the north. Xiaolinjun was like a wolf and tiger, charging into the streets on the east and west. It was a complete massacre. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. He had some killing intent, but he didn't stop it. Go, stop Xiaolinjun in the northern region of the city. Yi Qinghan waved his hand and signaled. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers advanced in batches towards the center of the city. They wanted to seize all the important resources in their hands. The army was as fast as lightning. They were seizing resources. If they were a step slower, they would lose everything. In order to make use of Shaolin, they obviously couldn't use force against him. Jiang Jingtian and Shirgu led hundreds of thousands of soldiers to surround the city lord's mansion and the treasury, stopping Xiaolinjun in the northern region of the city. Shaolin was slightly angry, but he suppressed it in the end. Who asked him to have fewer people? He naturally didn't have an advantage in seizing resources. Yi Qinghan took in a large number of captives. He didn't forbid the commoners, but he had to control the army. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to waste time and set down restrictions. The Snow Border Army occupied the east, west, and south of the city. They didn't seize the resources of the commoners or the clans. However, the resources of the official forces were all seized. The army was very conscious and didn't humiliate the city lord's women. They had a strict system and a strong sense of honor. Even Shaolin felt ashamed of his inferiority. Establish a puppet army and let them control Steel Forest City. Yi Qinghan swept his gaze over the terrified commoners. He knew that it was better to use people to rule people. Only then would Steel Forest City not fall into chaos. The people of Steel Forest City naturally trusted their own people more. A special puppet army was quickly established. The governor was still the governor of Steel Forest City's guards, but he was restricted. After settling down Steel Forest City, Yi Qinghan gathered the army and appeared in the northern region of the city. He met up with Xiaolinjun and charged towards the border region. The border army had slightly more soldiers. They had already discovered that there was a problem at the rear and immediately set up defensive fortifications. However, when faced with Yi Qinghan's attack with a pseudo-world artifact, their fortifications were like paper and couldn't withstand a single blow. Xiaolinjun charged at the very front and fought with the Steel Forest Army. They suffered heavy casualties and their blood dyed the border river red. The true martial domain's guards on the other side of the border river immediately discovered the sudden change in the ultimate martial domain. They began to attack from the other side. They attacked from the front and back. Although the border army was strong, they couldn't withstand the attacks. In the end, they were completely slaughtered by Shaolin's army. Their corpses were all thrown into the border river. As they flowed down, some terrifying carnivorous fishes swam and devoured the corpses. Yi Qinghan didn't participate. Instead, he led the army back into Steel Forest City. After Shaolin dealt with the border army, he mobilized 5 million soldiers from the true martial domain. The royal family promised that as long as Shaolin broke through the true martial domain's core, he would be able to obtain a large amount of territory. The 5 million soldiers gathered outside Steel Forest City. It was a black mass, and the natives of Steel Forest were extremely terrified. Yi Qinghan came to the northern city wall and looked down at Shaolin. He said indifferently, "Senior, let the army stand guard outside the city. We can discuss how to attack the ultimate martial domain." Chapter 1403. In Steel Forest City, Shaolin was very bold. He directly entered alone to discuss the plan with Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan spread out a map. Using a red brush, he drew 2 lines along the extreme Dao mountain range and marked them with arrows. They converged from the 2 sides of the mountain range to the end, spanning approximately 12 prefectures and stretching endlessly. The extreme Dao mountain range starts from the Steel Forest Prefecture, crosses the Spring Divine Prefecture, Sihai Prefecture, and ends at the Clearwater Prefecture. After crossing the Clearwater Prefecture, it will be the hinterland of the ultimate martial world. You guys will start from the Spring Divine Prefecture, and we will start from the Heaven Connecting Gorge. The 2 armies will attack from the 2 sides of the extreme Dao mountain range, and finally converge at the hinterland of the ultimate martial world. I will lead the army to force the Heaven Martial Legion, Dragon God Legion, and Ultimate Martial Legion into the hinterland. We will cripple their 10 great legions and annihilate the Heaven Martial Legion. Finally, we will have them negotiate for peace. No problem. But you have to give Steel Forest City to us. Otherwise, the true martial world will waste a lot of time on resupplying, and it will affect our attack, said Shaolin firmly. However, Yi Qinghan shook his head and said firmly, I'm sorry, but there's no reason for me to give up the city I conquered. I can allow you to borrow the Dao Steel Forest City, but I won't allow Shaolinjun to mess around in the city. Obviously, Yi Qinghan didn't plan on letting the true martial world's army return alive. The city here would be an important place for him to seal off the borders of the true martial world. I can use other cities to exchange with you, or other conditions. Mr. Zhua, please state your price. Shaolin looked straight at Yi Qinghan. He definitely couldn't let Yi Qinghan control such an important place. This was equivalent to cutting off the throat of the true martial world's army. If he cut off this place, the fate of his army would no longer be in his control. Yi Qinghan slowly sat down and looked at Shaolin. Looking at his resolute gaze, he knew that he had to give up Steel Forest City. Otherwise, Shaolin wouldn't dare to mobilize his entire army, which would affect his final plan. Senior Shaolin, why don't you state your bottom line? I'll see if you have the sincerity. If you do, it's not impossible for me to give Steel Forest City to you, Yi Qinghan said calmly. Shaolin pondered for a long time, then said in a deep voice, Steel Forest City controls the fate of the true martial realm's army. Even though I want to take revenge, I won't let the army take such a risk. There's even the danger of the entire army being annihilated. This old man cannot give you the control of Steel Forest City. As long as you are willing to give up the control of Steel Forest City, this old man is willing to give you a world stone and a phosphorus crystal. These are the treasures that the fake world lord loves the most. Realm Stone. Yi Qinghan's eyebrows twitched, and a glint flashed across his eyes. He immediately asked, what level is the Realm Stone? Let me have a look. Shaolin took out a stone that was filled with world energy. It was fluctuating with divine radiance and a heavy pressure that could suppress one's soul. It looked like it was only the size of a fist, but the internal mass was extremely heavy. It weighed more than 5 kilograms. This was a divine stone used by world lords, and its level was very high. The world energy inside was equivalent to 30% of a world lord's peak strength. Once it exploded, it would be enough to destroy an entire primal chaos realm. However, to be able to fully control it, one had to be a peak pseudo-world lord expert. For someone like Shaolin, it was impossible for him to absorb the energy inside, and he couldn't use it either. Just a little bit of the energy inside was enough to make him explode. Therefore, such a divine treasure was useless to him. As for the phosphorus crystal, it was a divine material that aided the combustion of divine flames. It could melt pseudo-world artifact materials, and once the divine flames level was high enough, it could even refine world artifact materials. It was the favorite item of blacksmiths. This item was extremely rare, and it was naturally nurtured by the heavens. It was very hard to find. Yi Qinghan said without hesitation. Mr. Zhua is someone with great insight. You are still young, and pseudo-world lords are just at your fingertips. This old man will consider it as giving you a favor. Otherwise, one Steel Forest City wouldn't be able to exchange for such a supreme treasure. Shaolin smiled and expressed his goodwill. Yi Qinghan smiled, and the corner of his lips curled up. Lu Zhantian had died in Shaolinjun's hands, so Shaolin had to die. No matter what treasure he gave, it wouldn't change the outcome. However, Yi Qinghan still accepted the World Stone. Soon after, Yi Qinghan announced the withdrawal of the army, bringing away all the pseudo-soldiers in Steel Forest City. All the civilians were terrified. They knelt in front of the city gate and begged Yi Qinghan to bring them away as well. Once Shaolinjun took over this city, the experts would definitely be slaughtered, and the weak would become slaves. The fate of the women would be even more miserable. If Mr. is benevolent, you can bring away all the living beings in this city. This old man isn't interested in them. Xiao Lin brought a portion of the army into Steel Forest City. Soon after, he gave the phosphorus crystal to Yi Qinghan. This transaction was officially completed, and he was in a good mood. Thus, he gave Yi Qinghan a favor. Yi Qinghan looked at the people kneeling in front of the city gate. After thinking for a moment, he said, "You can follow the army through the extreme Dao mountain range, but you have to keep up with the troops. Once you reach the extreme Dao state, you can build your own city." "Many thanks, Mr. Mr. is benevolent. We definitely won't be enemies with you." The civilians in Steel Forest City were overjoyed. Their families were even more excited as they kowtowed and expressed their gratitude. Yi Qinghan then led the army and led everyone towards the extreme Dao mountain range. The pseudo-soldiers might have taken care of the civilians because they were from the same hometown. However, since the civilians couldn't keep up with the army, they could only guard the rear. Yi Qinghan didn't stop them. He first led the army through the extreme Dao mountain range. After a month, they returned to extreme Dao city. The civilians of Steel Forest City were led by the pseudo-soldiers. After a long and arduous journey, they finally reached the vicinity of extreme Dao city after half a year. Yi Qinghan had already given the order to allow the civilians of Steel Forest City to build a city on the ruins of the extreme Dao sect. With the help of the pseudo-soldiers, they were able to build a new home. This batch of civilians had a good relationship with Yi Qinghan. Many young experts took the initiative to request to join the army. They hoped to make contributions and have a good position so that they could help their loved ones in Steel Forest City. Otherwise, they would feel uneasy. The pseudo-soldiers were already dead set on Yi Qinghan, and the extreme Dao state was completely under his control. At this time, Yi Qinghan had already led the army to break through the Heaven Gorge and occupied the central state. He used war to support war, established the pseudo-army, and treated the civilians well. This resonated with the civilians of the extreme martial realm. A large number of young talents were depressed and started to join the army. They wanted to counterattack their own mother realms, hoping to build a fair and just world. With the help of the 4 pseudo-world artifacts, the supply of supplies from the rear was very fast. It wasn't strenuous to fight at all. However, there were many traders in the extreme martial realm. Although these traders were scum to the extreme martial realm, their living conditions had been greatly improved. It was every man for himself. If their mother realms didn't treat them well, it didn't matter if they betrayed them. The army rampaged and drove straight in, forcing the 3 legions to retreat again and again. At this time, the paper spears appeared and started to attack even more fiercely. Chapter 1404. With the addition of Zhi Ge, the 3 legions were defeated one after another. They had no choice but to send reinforcements from other realms. However, 4 out of the 8 legions of the Snow World Army were sent over, all under the control of Yi Qinghan. His position as commander was unbreakable. Zhi Gu and Zhu Wuxin were the deputy commanders. The 2 of them did not have any objections. The only ones who could control them were probably the snow god, Yi Qinghan or Ling Yan. Yi Qinghan led an army of 12 million. The main force was the 4 trump card legions, and the normal recruits were split into 8 legions. They swept through the world and forcefully seized 14 state cities. They completely controlled them. The eastern regions of the hinterland were all lost. The ultimate martial world was a bit anxious. Dragon Mountain State, Great Dragon Mountain City. It was a hilly region with a rugged mountain range. It was easy to defend and hard to attack. The Heaven Martial Legion, Dragon God Legion, and Ultimate Martial Legion cooperated with the local defenders to defend. Once this place was breached, it would be a flat plain behind them. It would be even harder to resist. Great Dragon Mountain City was located in the only large plain in the hilly region. It had a circumference of 1,000 miles. The front 2 wings were mountain peaks and the valleys were mountain paths. It was the most difficult to attack. Yi Qinghan led the army and appeared outside the valley. The military tents had already been set up, and the exit of the mountain range was used as a barrier to set up military fortifications. Yi Qinghan had gotten an armchair from somewhere. He sat in the middle of the valley and looked at the villages and the army. He was not in a hurry to attack. This mountainous region was the most dangerous. If they were not careful, they would be killed. If the army was defeated, it would affect the whole army and lead to the defeat of the entire army. If we break this place, the ultimate martial world will be defeated. Mr. Do you have a good plan? Ji Gu ordered people to bring over a table and 2 chairs. He sat opposite Zhu Wuxin on the left and right of Yi Qinghan and asked indifferently, Mr. Ji Gu and Brother Zhu, what do you think? Yi Qinghan asked indifferently, this place is full of mountains. They are used to mountain battles. It is very difficult to fight. If we attack, we will suffer heavy losses. Even if we break through Great Dragon Mountain City, the later battles will be very difficult. We might even lose our strength and completely collapse. Ji Gu said as he looked at the mountain range in front of them. Zhu Wuxin tasted the divine fruit on the table and fell into deep thought. It was as if he only knew how to eat. The divine bird was also tempted by the food. It ran to the table and swept it clean, leaving only the leftovers. Yi Qinghan flicked his finger lightly, sending the divine bird flying. Bang! The divine bird was like a small meatball as it fell heavily to the ground. It rolled several times and was stunned by the fall. It stood up and glared at Yi Qinghan. I just won't eat some of your divine fruits. Is there a need for this? The divine bird roared. Don't eat if you don't put in any effort, Yi Qinghan said with a raised eyebrow. Who said I didn't do anything? This divine bird is an intelligent, almighty being. Is there even a need for me to deal with such trash? Are you all idiots? The divine bird roared. Poof! Yi Gu spat out a mouthful of tea, spraying all over Zhu Wuxian's face. Zhu Wuxin looked at Jigin divine bird with an innocent and angry face. Who are you calling an idiot? Ji Gu felt that he was in the wrong. He avoided Zhu Wuxian's questioning gaze and chose to ignore it. He directly questioned the divine bird. Are you not an idiot? This is such a small place. Is it worth setting up a military camp for research? What a waste of resources. This divine bird only ate a little and you still attacked me. I'm so angry. The divine bird was so angry that it paced back and forth. It wanted to curse, but it couldn't think of any other way to deal with Yi Qinghan. It could only tremble all over. Yi Qinghan looked at the divine bird with interest. He leaned back in his chair and supported his head with his fist. He asked curiously, Divine bird, since you are an intelligent, almighty being, how do you think we should attack in order to minimize our losses and take down the Long Mountain City in the shortest time possible? Why should I tell you? What does it have to do with me? I'm so angry. The divine bird roared. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. If he gave this brat face, it would ascend to the heavens. Are you angry with me? Yi Qinghan's voice suddenly became cold. He stared at the divine bird with a sinister gaze, causing people to feel a chill. The divine bird's breath stagnated and its head shrank back. It immediately said firmly, How could I be? This divine bird is loyal and devoted. I've always been loyal to my master. I've never considered my own feelings in front of my master. How could I be angry with you? Oh. Yi Qinghan's tone was as calm as water. It was as if he hadn't heard the divine bird express its loyalty. In fact, he didn't believe the words that came out of its broken mouth. The divine bird was a little discouraged. It felt that its flattery had hit the nail on the head. It immediately sat on the ground powerlessly, as if it had been wronged. Then tell me, how should we attack? Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. Water attack, drown them. Fire attack, burn them to death. Use the method of destroying humans to destroy the Great Dragon Mountain region. Let them all die in a sea of fire. The divine bird roared, as if it had transferred all its hatred to the Dragon Mountain region. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes at the divine bird. He touched the chair with his fingertips and said hoarsely, It seems like you want to burn me to death with fire more. How could that be? The divine bird immediately retorted. Everyone thought that it would express its loyalty, but it quickly said, You have a fire origin body. How could I burn you with fire? Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. He said coldly, If I didn't have a fire origin body, you'd be prepared to burn me with fire? The divine bird sneered, But when it saw Yi Qinghan's cold face, it immediately continued, "That's absolutely impossible. My loyalty and reverence for my master is like a torrential river, continuous and unending. I don't even have enough time to revere you. How could I be disrespectful to you? I've been following you since I was young. Don't you understand me?" Yi Qinghan was too lazy to discuss with the divine bird. He immediately shut his mouth and looked at the surrounding mountains. There were trees, weeds, and thorns everywhere. If it was winter, once they were lit, it would be impossible to extinguish them. That would truly be a genocide plan. It was too vicious, and many innocent people would die. However, Zhu Wuxin and Ji Gu were somewhat tempted. The plan was feasible. Moreover, this was another world. They would not care about the lives of the people here. In the imperial city of the ultimate martial realm, the emperor's face was full of anger and worry. The 3 legions were retreating in defeat. He had sent 2 more legions as reinforcements, but they could only defend. They could not completely drive out the armies of the Snow Empire, the Realm of Gods, and the true martial realm, let alone counterattack. Are you all trash? Little Zhu Feng and Ji Gu, Zhu Wuxin, are juniors. The commanders of the 10 legions are actually helpless. Shaolin only has a few million troops, but they are still unable to stop their advance. What's the use of raising you? The main hall was filled with a deathly atmosphere. No one dared to volunteer to fight because Zhu Feng's army had 5 great pseudo-world weapons. Even if another legion was sent as reinforcements, it would still be impossible to change the situation. 10 million godstones for the heads of Zhu Feng, Ji Gu, and Zhu Wuxin. Kill any one of the 3 and you will be bestowed the title of king and a province's territory. Kill the commander of the vanguard of the left martial residence and you will be able to marry any one of the 7 princesses. A bounty spread out from the imperial city. It was like a sudden clap of thunder in the vast ultimate martial realm, setting off huge waves. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.